Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Message. Lucas Davenport stared at the text message on his phone, the blue light illuminating his weathered face in the dimness of the military transport plane. Around him, other soldiers dozed or chatted excitedly about returning home for Christmas, but Lucas felt the blood drain from his face as he read the message again. Christmas is better without you. Mom doesn't want you here either. Don't come. The text was from Aiden, his 16-year-old son. After 3 consecutive deployments with special forces spanning 4 years, with only brief visits home, this was to be Lucas's triumphant return, his first real Christmas with his family in years. He had endured firefights in dust-choked valleys, spent endless nights in forward operating bases, and watched brothers in arms fall beside him, all with a single sustaining thought: I'm doing this for them, for my family. His fingers hovered over the phone. So many responses flooded his mind. Questions, protests, anger. But 17 years of military discipline had taught him economy of expression. He typed a single word: understood. Then he switched to his banking app and made a quiet change to some paperwork. A few taps on the screen transferred funds from a joint account to a private one his wife, Melissa, didn't know existed. Lucas had always been prudent. The plane hit turbulence, but Lucas barely registered the jolt. His mind was already racing ahead, tactical planning kicking in. The same skills that had kept him alive in combat now redirected toward a different kind of battlefield. Sergeant Wilson, seated beside him, noticed his expression. Everything all right, Davenport? Bad news from home. Lucas locked his phone. Just a change of plans. Thought you were headed straight to Colorado Springs? Lucas said, his voice even. Now I'm not. Colonel Ray Peters found Lucas in the terminal after they landed at Andrews Air Force Base. The colonel had been Lucas's commanding officer for 7 years and knew him better than most. Davenport, thought you'd be halfway to Colorado by now. Your connecting flight left 20 minutes ago. Lucas glanced up from his laptop. Taking a detour, sir. Colonel Peters studied him. Your wife know about this detour? No, sir. The colonel sat beside him. Trouble at home? Nothing I can't handle. Lucas continued typing, finalizing a rental car reservation. You've been through hell these past few deployments, Davenport. Kandahar. That mess in Syria. The extraction in Yemen. You've earned your homecoming. Lucas stopped typing. Turns out I'm not welcome at home. The colonel's eyebrows rose. Want to talk about it? Not particularly, sir. Fair enough. Peters handed him a business card. My brother-in-law. Best divorce attorney in Virginia. Just in case your detour becomes permanent. Lucas took the card, tucking it into his wallet. Appreciate it, sir. Whatever's happening, remember who you are, Davenport. You're a planner. Don't do anything rash. Lucas smiled thinly. I never do, sir. Everything I do is calculated. 48 hours later, Lucas sat in a modest hotel room in Denver, watching his phone light up with the 13th missed call in 2 hours. This one from a Colorado number he didn't recognize. He let go to voicemail. When the notification appeared, he played it back. Mr. Davenport, this is Graham Phillips from Phillips & Waterman Attorneys at Law. I'm representing Melissa Davenport in this matter. It is imperative that we speak immediately regarding the financial actions you've taken. Please call our office as soon as possible. Lucas checked his watch. Then he opened his laptop and refreshed the banking page. The transfer had cleared. The second phase of his plan could begin. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist. And Melissa had forgotten that. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Lucas remembered his wedding day 16 years ago. Melissa had been radiant in her simple white dress, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. Back then, he'd been a young lieutenant with dreams of making a difference, and she'd been a dedicated nurse with a compassionate heart. They'd built a life together brick by brick. The house in Colorado Springs, the birth of Aiden, and 3 years later, their daughter Nora. The long deployments had started taking their toll during his 3rd tour. Lucas had tried to bridge the distance. Video calls whenever possible, care packages sent for birthdays and anniversaries, planning special trips during his leaves. But something had changed over the past year. Melissa's calls grew shorter, her letters less frequent. He'd attributed it to the stress of managing everything alone. Now, sitting in a nondescript rental car outside his own home, Lucas realized how naive he'd been. A silver Audi he didn't recognize sat in his driveway, next to Melissa's SUV. Through binoculars, Lucas watched as a tall man with salt and pepper hair emerged from his front door, followed by Melissa. They embraced on the porch, not a friendly hug, but an intimate one that ended with a lingering kiss. Lucas remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled as he had been trained to do while on surveillance missions. He snapped several photos with his phone and then started the car. As he pulled away, he caught sight of Aiden watching from an upstairs window. Their eyes met briefly before Lucas drove off. His next stop was Riverdale High School. He waited in the parking lot until the final bell rang and students began streaming out. It took him 10 minutes to spot Nora among the crowd. His 14-year-old daughter had grown taller since he'd last seen her, her hair now styled differently, but he'd recognize her anywhere. He watched as she climbed into a friend's car, laughing at something. No sign that her world was crumbling. No indication that she'd participated in sending that text. But he needed to be sure. That evening, Lucas followed the silver Audi to an upscale neighborhood in the northern part of the city. The man, who Lucas now knew from a simple DMV record search, was Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox, chief of surgery at Memorial Hospital where Melissa worked, pulled into the driveway of a large Tudor-style home. Lucas parked and walked to a coffee shop with a view of the house. He opened his laptop and, using skills acquired during intelligence operations, accessed public records about Dr. Wilcox. Divorced 3 years ago. 2 previous marriages, both ended the same way. A pattern was emerging. His phone rang again, Melissa. He declined the call and checked his email instead. The message from his old army buddy, now working in digital security, contained exactly what he'd asked for: access to Melissa's text message history. It was in black and white. The affair had been going on for 18 months. Messages planning rendezvous while Lucas was deployed. Discussions about their future together. And most damning of all, conversations about how to tell Lucas they wanted a divorce. Time for maximum financial advantage to Melissa. But the text that truly chilled his blood wasn't from Melissa to Nathaniel. It was from Melissa to Aiden, sent the day before Lucas received that crushing message. Your father's coming home tomorrow. Remember what we discussed. It's better this way. Dr. Wilcox will be a better father figure for you and Nora. Be strong. Lucas closed his laptop. His son hadn't betrayed him on his own. He'd been manipulated. But that didn't excuse his actions. Not entirely. As darkness fell, Lucas made his way to a different hotel, paid in cash, and began meticulously planning his next moves. Colonel Peters had been right about one thing. Lucas was a planner. But he'd been wrong about another. Sometimes calculated looked a lot like rash to people who didn't understand strategy. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Ted Phillips, your wife's attorney. You need to respond immediately or face legal consequences. Lucas typed back a single word, understood. Then he turned off his phone and continued planning. Chapter 3, The Strategy. The modest office building in downtown Denver housed Hanover Investigations, a private firm run by Dominic Foster, a former Marine who'd served with Lucas in Iraq during his first tour. Lucas hadn't called ahead, but Dominic's face lit up with recognition when he walked through the door. Davenport, heard you were still getting shot at overseas. The burly ex-Marine embraced him in a bear hug. Just got back, Lucas said, returning the hug with less enthusiasm. Dominic pulled back, studying his friend's face. This isn't a social call, is it? I need your help, Dom. An hour later, they sat surrounded by printouts of text messages, bank statements, and property records. Dominic whistled low. Your wife and the good doctor have been busy. Joint checking account opened 6 months ago. Weekend trips while you were deployed. And it looks like they've been house hunting together. He pointed to a series of emails. These are for viewings of properties in Aspen. Second homes. Vacation spots. Paid for with what money? Lucas asked, though he already knew the answer. Dominic met his eyes. Yours, brother. Your military salary. Your investment portfolio. And it looks like they've been accessing your grandfather's trust fund. The one you've been saving for the kids' college. Lucas felt a cold fury settle in his chest. The money didn't matter. What mattered was the betrayal. The calculated deception. What's your play here, Luke? Because running off half your assets and changing some beneficiaries won't be enough if she's got a good attorney. I'm not just changing beneficiaries, Lucas said quietly. I'm changing everything. But I need hard evidence. And I need it fast. Dominic nodded. I can get you everything in 72 hours. But it'll cost you. Money's not an issue. It's not just about the money. Dominic leaned forward. What are you planning to do with this information, Luke? Because if you're thinking about something permanent, I'm not going to kill anyone. If that's what you're asking, Lucas interrupted. I'm a soldier, not a murderer. Good. Because I wouldn't help with that. Dominic relaxed slightly. But I will help you burn their world to the ground legally. Just don't cross that line. The only line I'm interested in is the one between what's mine and what's theirs, Lucas assured him. And they've crossed it for the last time. That evening, Lucas checked into yet another hotel under a different name. He had always maintained operational security, a habit from his military career that now served a different purpose. His phone showed 27 missed calls, 15 from Melissa, 8 from her lawyer, 3 from Aiden, and 1 from an unknown number. He listened to the voicemail from the unknown caller. Dad, it's Nora. Mom and Aiden won't tell me what's going on, but I know something's wrong. Mom's been crying, and there are weird men in suits at the house asking questions. Please call me back. I miss you. Lucas closed his eyes. Nora, his sweet, perceptive daughter. The voice message suggested she hadn't been part of the plan to drive him away. He saved the voicemail, but didn't call back. Not yet. First, he needed to be sure. His laptop pinged with an incoming email from Dominic. The subject line read, First batch of evidence. More coming tomorrow. You were right. Attached were surveillance photos of Dr. Wilcox entering Lucas's home using his own key. Time-stamped images showed him comfortable in Lucas's space, wearing Lucas's robe, drinking from Lucas's coffee mug, little violations that somehow cut deeper than the affair itself. But most valuable was the audio file, legal in Colorado with one-party consent, of Melissa and Nathaniel discussing their plans. Once the divorce is final, we'll sell this place, combine our assets, and build something that's truly ours, Melissa was saying. No more ghosts of Lucas haunting every room. What about the kids? Nathaniel asked. Aiden's already on board. He barely remembers his father anymore, just the broken promises and missed birthdays. Nora will be tougher, but she'll adjust. Children are resilient. And the money? His military pension, the investments? Melissa's laugh was cold, unfamiliar. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. After 16 years of marriage, with him absent for most of it, I'll get at least half of everything. My lawyer says we have a good case for more, given his extended absences. The recording continued, but Lucas had heard enough. They weren't just planning to replace him. They were planning to rob him of everything he'd worked for, including his children. Lucas opened his secure email and composed a message to Colonel Peters. Sir, remember that conversation we had at Andrews? I may need your brother-in-law's services after all. But first, I need a favor only you can provide. He hit send, then called the number for Phillips and Waterman attorneys. This is Lucas Davenport, he said when the receptionist answered. I believe Mr. Phillips has been trying to reach me. One moment, Mr. Davenport. The line clicked and a smooth, professional voice came on. Mr. Davenport, thank you for finally returning our calls. Your actions have caused my client considerable distress. Have they? Lucas kept his voice neutral. Emptying joint accounts without notice is not looked upon favorably by family courts. I strongly advise you to reverse these transactions immediately. I'll consider that advice, Mr. Phillips. This isn't a negotiation, the lawyer continued. Unless you want to find yourself on the losing end of a very expensive legal battle, you'll transfer those funds back by close of business today. Mr. Phillips, Lucas said calmly. Has your client informed you of the full nature of her relationship with Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox? A pause. I'm not at liberty to discuss. Or about their plans for my children. Or how they've been systematically accessing my grandfather's trust fund for their personal use. A fund explicitly designated for my children's education. Silence. I thought not, Lucas continued. You'll be receiving a package of evidence tomorrow morning. After you've reviewed it, if you still wish to represent Melissa Davenport, we can continue this conversation. Until then, I have nothing further to say. He hung up before the lawyer could respond and turned his attention back to his computer. Phase 1 was complete, securing his assets and gathering evidence. Now came Phase 2, the strategic counterattack. Colonel Peters had taught him an important lesson years ago. In warfare, the objective isn't to fight fair, it's to win decisively. Lucas intended to do exactly that. Chapter 4, The Leverage. 3 days after his return to American soil, Lucas sat across from attorney Victoria Reeves in her downtown Denver office. Colonel Peters' brother-in-law had connected him with Reeves, describing her as a shark who smiles only when she smells blood in the water. The elegant, silver-haired woman reviewed the dossier Lucas had compiled with Dominic's help, her expression remaining impassive until she reached the financial records. Then her eyebrows rose fractionally. Dr. Wilcox has been writing prescriptions for non-existent patients and billing insurance companies, she noted, tapping a manicured nail against the document. And your wife has been falsifying nursing records to cover for him. That's insurance fraud. Yes, Lucas confirmed. And these property purchases in Aspen, using a shell company funded by your grandfather's trust, that's misappropriation of fiduciary funds. Also yes. Victoria closed the folder. Mr. Davenport, with evidence this comprehensive, we could not only secure you a very favorable divorce settlement, but potentially see your wife and her paramour facing criminal charges. I'm not interested in criminal charges, Lucas clarified. Not yet. I want leverage. For what purpose? My children, Lucas said simply. Melissa has poisoned my son against me. I need time to fix that. Victoria studied him. Most clients in your position want blood. I'm not most clients. I've seen enough bloodshed to last several lifetimes. Very well. She steepled her fingers. Here's what I propose. We prepare divorce filings, but don't submit them immediately. Instead, we arrange a meeting with your wife and her attorney, without Dr. Wilcox present. We present selected evidence and outline terms. What terms? Full physical custody of your children during divorce proceedings. Exclusive access to your family home. Complete separation of your financial assets from hers. And a gag order preventing her from discussing the case with anyone, including Dr. Wilcox. Lucas considered this. They won't agree. They will when the alternative is federal prosecution for insurance fraud. Victoria smiled thinly. People facing prison become remarkably flexible negotiators. Lucas nodded. Set up the meeting. But there's something else I need to do first. That afternoon, Lucas sat in his rental car outside Riverdale High School. When the final bell rang, he spotted Nora immediately. She was walking alone, head down, none of the carefree joy he'd observed days earlier. He stepped out of the car. Nora. His daughter froze, then turned slowly. Her eyes widened. Dad! For a moment, neither moved. Then Nora ran to him, colliding with his chest as his arms wrapped around her. She was sobbing. You came back, she managed between breaths. You got my message. I did. He held her tightly. I'm sorry I didn't call back sooner. She pulled away slightly. Mom said you abandoned us, that you took all our money and disappeared. Lucas felt a sharp stab of anger, but kept his expression gentle. That's not what happened, Nora. But it's complicated. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Probably, he admitted. But that doesn't change how I feel about you, or Aiden. Aiden hates you right now, she said bluntly. He believes everything Mom and Dr. Nate say. Dr. Nate? That's what they want us to call him. Nora rolled her eyes, as if he's suddenly family. Lucas suppressed a surge of fury. Has he been staying at the house? Almost every night since you left. Mom said it's because she's scared you might come back and hurt her. The accusation hit Lucas like a physical blow. Nora, I would never. I know, Dad. Her faith in him was unwavering. I told them that, but they don't listen to me. They treat me like a child. You're a child, Lucas said softly. My child. And I'm going to fix this. How? Do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. Then I need you to do something for me. Lucas handed her a small, encrypted flash drive. This contains some information. I need you to plug it into your mother's laptop and press the button that says execute. Can you do that? What will it do? Nora asked, examining the device. It will help me protect you and Aiden, Lucas said. And it won't harm anyone. I promise. Nora tucked the drive into her pocket. I'll do it tonight. One more thing, Lucas said. Don't tell anyone you saw me today. Not your brother, not your mother. No one. Can you keep that secret? Yes. She hugged him again. When will I see you again? Soon, Lucas promised. Very soon. As he watched Nora walk away, Lucas felt both pride and sorrow. His daughter's loyalty was a bright spot in this darkness, but the fact that she had been drawn into this mess filled him with regret. Children shouldn't have to choose sides between parents. But Melissa had forced that choice, and now she would face the consequences. Later that night, Lucas's laptop pinged with an alert. The program on the flash drive had been activated. Within seconds, data began flowing to a secure server. Emails, text messages, financial records, browser history. Everything on Melissa's laptop. Among the files was a folder labeled Divorce Strategy. Inside were documents detailing plans that had been in motion for over a year, consultations with attorneys, discussions with financial advisors about hiding assets, and, most disturbingly, a psychological evaluation of Lucas that portrayed him as potentially unstable due to PTSD from his deployments. They had been building a case to paint him as an unfit father, a dangerous man whose military service had left him broken. Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Meeting set for tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. Both M and her attorney confirmed. Lucas sent back his acknowledgement, then opened the dossier he'd been building. With the new information from Melissa's laptop, his position was even stronger. The house of cards she and Dr. Wilcox had constructed was about to collapse. His phone rang. Dominic. You need to see this, his friend said without preamble. Wilcox just made a large cash withdrawal and purchased one-way tickets to Cancun for next week. 2 passengers, him and your wife. They're planning to run, Lucas realized. Looks that way. What's your move? Lucas thought for a moment. Let them think their plan is still viable. For now, playing with fire, brother. Fire is only dangerous if you're the one getting burned, Lucas replied. And I have no intention of being anywhere near the flames when they ignite. Chapter 5. The Meeting. Victoria Reeves's conference room projected power and wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. A massive mahogany table that could seat 20, and artwork that Lucas suspected cost more than his annual salary. It was designed to intimidate, and judging by the nervous glances Melissa kept exchanging with her attorney, it was working. Lucas sat beside Victoria, his posture relaxed but alert. Across the table, Melissa looked both angry and afraid, an interesting combination. Her attorney, Graham Phillips, maintained a professional facade, but his frequent checking of his watch betrayed his anxiety. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Victoria began, her voice smooth as polished marble. We have a proposal that could save everyone considerable time, expense, and public embarrassment. Phillips cleared his throat. Before we proceed, my client demands the immediate return of funds Mr. Davenport improperly removed from joint accounts. Victoria smiled, the predatory expression Lucas had been warned about. Mr. Phillips, I'd advise against making demands in your current position. She slid a folder across the table. Please review these documents while we wait. As Phillips opened the folder, Lucas studied his wife. Melissa had always been beautiful, tall and slender with auburn hair and green eyes that had once looked at him with love. Now those same eyes avoided his gaze, focusing instead on her manicured nails. Phillips's face paled as he turned each page. Where did you get these records? Does their provenance matter more than their contents? Victoria countered. These allegations are factual, Victoria interrupted. Every document in that folder has been verified. The insurance fraud alone carries a minimum 5-year federal sentence. Melissa's head snapped up. Insurance fraud? What are you talking about? Phillips placed a restraining hand on her arm. We need to confer privately. By all means, Victoria gestured to a side door. The adjoining room is available. As they left, Lucas remained silent, his eyes fixed on the Denver skyline. He prepared himself for this moment, seeing Melissa confronting the betrayal face to face. What he hadn't expected was the hollow feeling in his chest. Not pain or anger, just emptiness. "You're handling this well," Victoria observed quietly. "I've had worse days," Lucas replied. "Most clients break down or rage. You're remarkably composed." "Military training," Lucas explained. "Emotion clouds judgment, and I need clear judgment right now." Melissa and Phillips returned 15 minutes later. Phillips looked resigned, while Melissa's earlier fear had transformed into cold fury. "We're prepared to discuss terms," Phillips announced. Victoria outlined their demands. Lucas would retain the family home and primary custody of both children during divorce proceedings. Melissa would move out immediately. The trust fund would be frozen pending final settlement, and a temporary gag order would prevent either party from discussing the case with anyone outside their legal counsel. "This is extortion," Melissa hissed, finally meeting Lucas's eyes. "You're using our children as pawns." "That's an interesting accusation," Lucas responded, his voice calm, "coming from the woman who coached our son to tell me not to come home for Christmas." "You weren't coming home for us," Melissa shot back. "You were coming home because your deployment ended. There's a difference, and that difference justifies what you did. 16 years, Lucas. 16 years of raising our children alone while you played hero in foreign countries. Of never knowing if you were dead or alive. Of restarting our lives every time you got transferred. What did you expect? Honesty," Lucas said simply. "If you wanted out, you could have said so. Instead, you lied. You stole. You turned our son against me. I protected our son from more disappointment." Melissa's voice cracked. "From more empty promises and missed birthdays." Lucas leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, Melissa. You're going to sign these papers. You're going to move out of our house. And then you're going to tell Aiden the truth about why I stayed away when I was supposed to come home for Christmas. And if I refuse?" Lucas nodded to Victoria, who produced another folder. "Then these documents go to the FBI, the Colorado Medical Board, and the press." Phillips placed a restraining hand on Melissa's arm again. "My client will sign the temporary agreement. One condition," Melissa said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Nathaniel isn't mentioned in any of this. Leave him out of it." Lucas exchanged a glance with Victoria, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Agreed," Lucas said. "For now." As Melissa signed the documents, Lucas felt no triumph, no vindication. Just the weight of what came next, rebuilding his relationship with his children, particularly Aiden, while navigating the wreckage of his marriage. His phone vibrated with a text from Dominic. "Subject 2 just booked a third ticket to Cancun. Child's fare." Lucas's blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to flee, they were planning to take one of his children with them. And given Aiden's animosity toward him, it wasn't hard to guess which child. He showed the message to Victoria, whose expression hardened. "Sign here, Mr. Davenport," she said, indicating the final page. "We have additional matters to address immediately." As they left the conference room, Victoria whispered, "My office." Now, once inside her private office with the door closed, Victoria's professional calm gave way to urgent efficiency. "If they're planning to take your son out of the country against a custody order, we need an emergency hearing," she said, already dialing her assistant. "Judge Watkins owes me a favor. We can get before him this afternoon." "We need more than a hearing," Lucas said. "We need surveillance on both Melissa and Wilcox. And we need to secure Aiden." "Mr. Davenport, whatever you're thinking, they won't just abduct my son in broad daylight," Lucas interrupted. "They'll wait until the last possible moment, probably the night before their flight. We need to be ready." Victoria studied him. "You've thought this through. I plan for contingencies, Ms. Reeves. It's what kept me alive all these years." She nodded slowly. "I'll get the emergency order. You focus on keeping track of your son." Lucas was already texting Dominic. "Need eyes on subject 3 immediately. School, home, all movements." The response came quickly. "On it." "What about subject 1? Lucas considered his options. Melissa was angry, but constrained by the agreement she'd just signed. Dr. Wilcox, however, had no such constraints. Priority on 2 and 3, he replied. 1 is neutralized for now. What Lucas didn't share with either Victoria or Dominic was the final phase of his plan, the one that would ensure Melissa and Nathaniel never threatened his family again. For that, he needed different allies. As he left Victoria's office, Lucas made a call to a number few people possessed, the direct line to Colonel Peters' secure phone. "It's Davenport," he said when the colonel answered. "I need to activate contingency, Delta." There was a pause. "That's extreme, Lucas. Are you sure?" "They're planning to take my son out of the country, sir." "So yes, I'm sure." "Understood. I'll make the calls. Delta will be active within the hour." Lucas ended the call and checked his watch. 18 hours until the endgame began. Chapter 6, The Precipice. The emergency hearing before Judge Watkins lasted less than 30 minutes. With evidence of the planned flight to Cancun and the newly signed custody agreement, the judge had no difficulty issuing an emergency order prohibiting either child from leaving the country and restricting their travel beyond Colorado without Lucas's written permission. Armed with the court order, Lucas drove to Riverdale High School. The final bell had just rung, and students were streaming toward buses and waiting cars. He spotted Aiden immediately, taller than when Lucas had last seen him, with the same dark hair and strong jawline that Lucas saw in the mirror every morning. Lucas approached slowly, giving his son time to notice him. When Aiden looked up and saw him, the boy froze, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and confusion. "What are you doing here?" Aiden demanded when Lucas reached him. "I need to talk to you," Lucas said quietly. "I have nothing to say to you." Aiden turned away. Lucas placed a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. "This isn't optional, Aiden. We're going to talk. Now, Mom said you can't force me to go with you. Your mother doesn't make those decisions anymore," Lucas said, showing Aiden the court order. "As of 2 hours ago, I have primary custody of both you and your sister during the divorce proceedings." "Divorce?" Aiden's voice cracked. "So you're really leaving us?" The accusation, so backward, so twisted from reality, struck Lucas like a physical blow. "Is that what she told you? That I'm leaving?" Aiden looked away. "She said you were never really here anyway." "Let's go somewhere we can talk privately," Lucas suggested, gesturing to his car. After a moment's hesitation, Aiden followed. They drove in silence to a nearby park, found an empty bench, and sat side by side, watching kids play on a distant playground. "Do you know why I didn't come home for Christmas?" Lucas finally asked. Aiden stared at his hands. "Because I told you not to." "And why did you send that text?" Silence. "Aiden, I need you to be honest with me," Lucas pressed. "Was that message your idea, or did someone suggest it?" "Mom said." Aiden swallowed. "Mom said you were only coming home because you had to, that you didn't really want to be with us, that we'd all be happier if you just stayed away." Lucas took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "And you believed her? What was I supposed to believe?" Aiden's voice rose. "You've been gone for 4 years, Dad. 4 years. You missed everything. My basketball championships, my first girlfriend, Nora's middle school graduation. Everything." "I know," Lucas acknowledged. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I was serving our country, Aiden. I wasn't absent by choice. You could have transferred to a stateside post. Other military parents do it." "Yes, I could have," Lucas admitted. "And I was trying to arrange exactly that. My final deployment was supposed to be my last overseas tour. I was planning to request a training position at Fort Carson so I could be home every night." Aiden looked skeptical. "Really?" Lucas pulled out his phone and showed Aiden an email exchange with his commanding officer, dated 3 months earlier, discussing the transfer request. "I want to surprise you all at Christmas," Lucas explained. "A permanent homecoming, not just another leave." Aiden's shoulders slumped. "Mom never said anything about that." "I imagine there are a lot of things your mother hasn't told you," Lucas said carefully. "Like her relationship with Dr. Wilcox." Aiden's head snapped up. "What about Dr. Nate? How long have you known about them, Aiden?" "A few months," Aiden admitted. "Mom said they fell in love while you were gone. That sometimes these things happen." "And the trip to Cancun next week? Did she tell you about that?" Aiden's confused expression answered the question. "Your mother and Dr. Wilcox purchased 3 tickets to Mexico," Lucas explained. "For them and you. One-way tickets. That's not. Aiden stopped, uncertainty clouding his features. She wouldn't just take me away without telling me. She was planning to tell you at the last minute, Lucas said gently. Probably with some story about how I'd agreed to it, or how it was just a vacation. How do you know that? Because I've seen the evidence, Aiden. The ticket purchases. The rental property they secured in Cancun. The Mexican school they contacted about enrollment. Aiden looked devastated. Why would she do that? Because she and Dr. Wilcox have been misappropriating money from the trust fund your great-grandfather set up for your college education, Lucas explained. They were about to be caught, so they planned to run. I don't believe you, Aiden said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucas handed him a folder containing printouts of the evidence, carefully selected to prove his claims without revealing the full extent of Melissa and Nathaniel's crimes. As Aiden read through the documents, his expression hardened. She lied to me. Yes, Lucas confirmed. She did. And that text she had me send you was part of her plan to keep me away until they could finalize their escape. Aiden closed the folder, his hands trembling slightly. What happens now? Now I take you home, Lucas said. To our home. Your mother will be moving out tonight, per the court order. And Dr. Nate? He won't be welcome in our home anymore. Aiden nodded slowly. What about Nora? She'll be with us too. Does she know about all this? Lucas hesitated. She knows some of it. She never believed the lies about me. That brought a flash of shame to Aiden's eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. For the text. For believing Mom. You're 16, Aiden. You trusted your mother, as you should have been able to. Lucas placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The blame isn't on you. As they drove home, Lucas's phone buzzed with updates from Dominic. Melissa had been observed packing suitcases. Dr. Wilcox had withdrawn another $50,000 in cash. They were accelerating their plans, despite the court order. Lucas texted back, maintain surveillance. Alert me to any approach to either child or the airport. Then he called Colonel Peters. Delta is in position, the colonel confirmed. Just give the word. Not yet, Lucas replied. Let them make the first move. When they arrived home, Nora was waiting on the porch. She ran to embrace both of them, her relief palpable when she saw Aiden with their father. You fixed it, she said to Lucas. Not yet, Lucas corrected, but I'm working on it. Inside, the house showed signs of hasty packing. Empty spaces on shelves, gaps in the closets visible through the master bedroom's open door. Melissa had clearly taken what she could grab quickly. Lucas gathered his children in the living room. I know this is all happening very fast, he began, and there's a lot I haven't told you yet about what's been going on between your mother and me. Is it true she stole our college money? Aiden asked bluntly. Nora gasped. What? Not all of it, Lucas clarified. I managed to secure most of the trust before any permanent damage was done. But yes, she and Dr. Wilcox were accessing funds they shouldn't have been. For the house in Aspen, Nora said quietly. Both Lucas and Aiden turned to her in surprise. I heard them talking about it, she explained, about how they'd have weekend getaways in the mountains while we were at school or with friends. The casual cruelty of that plan, excluding the children from their stolen luxury, reignited Lucas's cold fury. But he kept his expression neutral for his children's sake. The important thing now is that we're together, he told them. And I promise you both, I'm not leaving again. My active service days are over. As they prepared dinner together, a simple meal of pasta and salad, the first they'd shared as a family in years, Lucas maintained a careful vigilance. He knew Melissa wouldn't accept defeat easily. The court order, the exposure of her plans, the loss of her children, these were setbacks, not surrender. His phone vibrated with a text from Dominic. Subjects 1 and 2 meeting at hotel near airport. Surveillance in place. Perfect. Everything was proceeding according to plan. After dinner, as Aiden and Nora settled in to watch a movie, Lucas excused himself to make a call from his study. He couldn't afford to have his children overhear this conversation. Colonel, he said when Peters answered. Initiate Delta. Phase 1 only. Understood, the colonel replied. Timeline, 20 minutes. Lucas ended the call and rejoined his children, his expression betraying nothing of what was about to unfold. Exactly 19 minutes later, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. "Excuse me," he told Aiden and Nora. "I need to take this." In the privacy of the kitchen, he answered. "Davenport." "Sir, this is Agent Reynolds, DEA. We've executed the warrant at the location you identified through your military intelligence channels. I'm calling to inform you that we've detained 2 individuals found in possession of significant quantities of controlled substances, including oxycodone and fentanyl, without prescription authorization." "I see," Lucas said. "And their identities?" "A Dr. Nathaniel Wilcox and a woman identified as Melissa Davenport. She claims to be your wife, sir." "She is," Lucas confirmed. "For now, given your position with military intelligence and your role in providing this information, we wanted to confirm how you'd like us to proceed." "Process them according to standard protocols, Agent Reynolds. No special treatment." "Understood, sir. We'll keep you updated as the case progresses." Lucas ended the call and leaned against the counter, closing his eyes briefly. Phase 1 complete. His wife and her lover were now in federal custody, facing charges that would keep them occupied for quite some time. Charges based on evidence that had been carefully, legally obtained through proper channels. The prescription fraud they'd been committing for months had finally caught up with them. The fact that the investigation had been expedited through Lucas's military connections was merely a matter of fortunate timing. He composed his features and returned to the living room. "Everything okay, Dad?" Nora asked, noticing his expression. "Yes," Lucas assured her. "Everything is exactly as it should be." Chapter 7, The Fallout. The morning headlines were sensational. Prominent surgeon and nurse arrested in prescription drug scheme. Lucas watched his children's reactions as they read the news on their phones over breakfast. Aiden looked stunned. "Mom was arrested?" "Last night," Lucas confirmed. "The DEA had been investigating Dr. Wilcox for prescription fraud for some time. Your mother was implicated. Will she go to jail?" Nora asked, her voice small. "That depends on many factors," Lucas said carefully. "The evidence against them is substantial, but first-time offenders sometimes receive reduced sentences." "Did you know this was going to happen?" Aiden asked, studying his father with newfound perception. "I knew there was an investigation," Lucas acknowledged. "I didn't know when they would make arrests." This wasn't technically a lie. Lucas had indeed known about the DEA's interest in Dr. Wilcox's prescription practices, information he'd obtained legally through his military connections. The timing of the arrests, however, had been accelerated through those same connections. "Can we see her?" Nora asked. "She'll have an arraignment hearing today," Lucas explained. "After that, if she's granted bail, you can see her. And if she's not," Aiden pressed, "then visits would be arranged through the detention facility." Lucas observed his son's troubled expression. "Aiden, I know this is difficult, but your mother made choices that had consequences. This isn't my doing." Another technical truth. Lucas hadn't fabricated evidence or filed false reports. He had simply ensured that legitimate investigations weren't delayed by bureaucracy or overlooked due to Dr. Wilcox's prominent position. "What about our holiday?" Nora asked suddenly. "We were supposed to leave for Cancun next week." Lucas and Aiden exchanged a glance. "There's been a change of plans," Lucas said gently. "That trip wasn't what you were told it was," as he explained the true nature of the planned vacation. A permanent relocation designed to evade financial and legal accountability. Lucas watched understanding dawn in Nora's eyes. "They were going to take Aiden and leave me behind?" Her voice cracked with hurt. "The third ticket was in Aiden's name," Lucas confirmed, "but I can't say for certain what their long-term plans were for you." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. "Mom was going to abandon me." "Hey." Lucas moved to kneel beside her chair. "No one is abandoning you. I'm here. I'm staying. And we're going to get through this together, all 3 of us." Aiden, in a gesture that surprised Lucas, reached across the table to take his sister's hand. "Dad's right. We stick together now." The moment was interrupted by Lucas's phone. Victoria Reeves's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into the next room. "Yes, Victoria?" "The arraignment is scheduled for 2 p.m., she reported. "Judge Harmon's courtroom. Given the nature of the charges and the flight risk, documented by those one-way tickets, the prosecutor is pushing for remand without bail." "Good," Lucas said. There's more, Victoria continued. Dr. Wilcox is turning on your wife. His attorney has already approached the DA about a deal. He testifies that Melissa was the mastermind behind both the prescription fraud and the misappropriation of trust funds, and he gets reduced charges. Lucas's jaw tightened. Is the DA considering it? They're listening. Wilcox has considerable influence in this community. But with the evidence we've provided about the trust fund, evidence that clearly shows Wilcox was the primary beneficiary, his story has significant holes. I want to be at the arraignment, Lucas decided. Are you sure that's wise? The press will be there. Let them come, Lucas said firmly. I have nothing to hide. After ending the call, Lucas returned to the kitchen to find his children in serious conversation, which abruptly stopped when he entered. The arraignment is this afternoon, he told them. I'll be attending. We want to come too, Aiden said, exchanging a glance with Nora, who nodded in agreement. Lucas considered his options. Shielding them from his ugliness was his instinct, but they'd already been exposed to so much. Perhaps witnessing the consequences of their mother's actions would provide a necessary, if painful, clarity. All right, he conceded, but you need to understand, this won't be easy to watch. We know, Nora said softly, but we need to see her. Lucas nodded. Get ready. We leave in an hour. While his children prepared, Lucas made another call, this one to Dominic. Progress report, he requested. Bank records confirmed Dr. Wilcox transferred $1.2 million to an offshore account in the Caymans last month, Dominic reported. And get this, Melissa's signature is on the wire transfer authorization. They weren't just stealing from the trust fund. They were setting up their escape long before you came home. Can we trace the money? Already done. I forwarded the details to Victoria. With this evidence, Wilcox's attempt to paint Melissa as the mastermind falls apart. They were equal partners in this scheme. Good work, Lucas said. Keep digging. I want to know everything. There's one more thing, Dominic added. Your home equity line of credit. Melissa maxed it out 2 weeks ago. $300,000 transferred directly to Wilcox's personal account. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. Another betrayal. Another theft. Thank you, he said finally. I'll see you at the courthouse. The Denver County Courthouse buzzed with activity as Lucas and his children arrived. Press cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions that Lucas ignored as he guided Aiden and Nora through the security checkpoint and into the building. Victoria met them in the hallway outside courtroom 3B. They're bringing the defendants up now. Are you prepared for this? We are, Lucas assured her, though he noted Nora's pale face and Aiden's clenched jaw. Remember, Victoria cautioned the children, no matter what happens in there, no outbursts. The judge won't tolerate disruptions. They nodded solemnly and followed her into the courtroom, taking seats in the second row. Lucas positioned himself between his children, a physical barrier against what was to come. The side door opened, and bailiffs led in Melissa and Dr. Wilcox, both wearing orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed in front of them. Melissa's red-rimmed eyes scanned the courtroom frantically until they locked on Lucas and the children. Her expression crumpled. Mom, Nora whispered, half rising. Lucas placed a gentle hand on her arm, and she sank back in her seat. The proceedings moved quickly. The charges were read. Conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, illegal distribution of controlled substances, wire fraud, misappropriation of fiduciary funds, and, most seriously, attempted parental kidnapping. When bail was discussed, the prosecutor was unequivocal. Your Honor, these defendants purchased one-way tickets to Mexico and were preparing to flee with a minor child of Ms. Davenport and her estranged husband. They represent the definition of flight risks. Dr. Wilcox's attorney argued for bail based on his client's standing in the community and lack of prior criminal record. Melissa's court-appointed lawyer, Graham Phillips, having withdrawn from the case after her arrest, made similar arguments. Judge Harmon was unmoved. Bail is denied for both defendants. They will be remanded to custody pending trial. As the bailiffs prepare to lead them out, Melissa turned toward Lucas and the children. Aiden, Nora, please, tell them this is a mistake. Your father is doing this to punish me. Aiden stared straight ahead, his expression hard. Nora buried her face against Lucas's shoulder. Defendants will refrain from addressing the gallery, Judge Harmon warned. As Melissa was led away, her eyes met Lucas's one final time. The hatred he saw there confirmed what he already knew. She would never forgive him for this, just as he would never forgive her for what she'd done to their family. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Victoria expertly deflected most questions, but one reporter managed to address Lucas directly. "Mr. Davenport, how does it feel to see your wife facing such serious charges?" Lucas considered his response carefully, aware of his children listening. "Justice is never a cause for celebration," he said finally. "But the truth needed to come to light for my children's sake." In the car driving home, Aiden broke the heavy silence. "Dad, was all of this necessary? Couldn't you have just divorced Mom without the arrests and everything?" Lucas glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "Aiden, what your mother and Dr. Wilcox were planning wasn't just morally wrong. It was criminal. They're going to take you out of the country against court orders. They stole from your trust fund. They committed fraud. These aren't accusations. They're documented facts." "But still," Nora interjected, "it's Mom. She raised us while you were gone." The implied accusation stung, but Lucas acknowledged its validity. "You're right, Nora, and I'll always be grateful to her for that. But being a good mother for many years doesn't excuse criminal behavior later." "What happens to us now?" Aiden asked. "We rebuild," Lucas said simply. "One day at a time." That evening, as his children retreated to their rooms to process the day's events, Lucas sat in his study reviewing the latest updates from Victoria and Dominic. The case against Melissa and Nathaniel was solidifying. With the offshore accounts uncovered and the trust fund misappropriation documented, they were looking at potential sentences of 10 to 15 years. Lucas felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a hollowness where his life with Melissa had once been. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Lucas. You've destroyed everything I built. I'll never forgive you for this. M." Somehow, despite everything, Melissa had found a way to contact him. Lucas saved the message as evidence of her continued hostility, but didn't respond. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Instead, he opened his laptop and began researching family therapists in the Denver area. His children would need professional support to navigate the trauma of their mother's betrayal and arrest. And though he would never admit it aloud, perhaps he needed it too. The road ahead would be difficult, but Lucas had never shied away from difficult missions. This one, rebuilding his family from the ashes of betrayal, would be his most important yet. Chapter 8. The Reconstruction. 6 weeks after Melissa's arrest, the Davenport household had established a new normal. Lucas had taken a position as a tactical consultant with a private security firm in Denver, allowing him to work regular hours and be home for dinner every night, a simple pleasure he'd missed during his years of deployment. Aiden's initial anger had gradually softened as he participated in weekly therapy sessions and came to terms with the reality of his mother's actions. Nora, though still quietly grieving the loss of her mother's presence, had shown remarkable resilience, throwing herself into school activities and spending more time with Lucas. On this particular evening, as they cleared the dinner dishes together, Lucas noticed Aiden's thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" he asked his son. Aiden hesitated. "Mom's preliminary hearing is next week." "Yes," Lucas acknowledged. "Victoria called this morning with the details." "Are you going?" "I haven't decided." Lucas studied his son. "Are you thinking about attending?" Aiden shrugged, attempting casualness. "Maybe. I haven't seen her since the arraignment." "You could visit her at the detention center," Lucas suggested. "I've told you before. I won't stand in the way of your relationship with your mother." "I know." Aiden placed a plate in the dishwasher with unnecessary care. "But seeing her in that place, it's hard." "Of course it is," Lucas agreed. "And no one would blame you for keeping your distance until you're ready." "What about you?" Aiden looked up. "Are you ever going to forgive her?" The question was direct, characteristic of the increased honesty in their relationship. Lucas considered his response carefully. "No," he said finally. "What your mother did wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a calculated plan to steal your future and separate you from me permanently. Some actions cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Aiden nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. Does that bother you? No, Aiden said, surprising Lucas. Actually, it makes me feel safer somehow, knowing you have boundaries that can't be violated. Lucas placed a hand on his son's shoulder, struck by the maturity in his assessment. At 16, Aiden was navigating moral complexities that many adults struggled with. Dr. Levine says holding on to anger hurts me more than mom, Aiden continued, referencing his therapist. But I don't know how to let it go. Forgiveness is a personal journey, Lucas said. Don't rush it and don't fake it. Whatever you feel, anger, sadness, confusion, it's valid. Their conversation was interrupted by Nora bounding into the kitchen, holding her phone triumphantly. Dad, Coach Williams just texted. I made the varsity soccer team. Lucas grinned, embracing his daughter. That's fantastic, Nora. When's your first game? As Nora excitedly detailed the upcoming season schedule, Lucas caught Aiden's eye over her shoulder. His son offered a small smile, an acknowledgement of their interrupted conversation and an acceptance of its conclusion. Later that night, after both children had gone to bed, Lucas sat in his study reviewing documents Victoria had sent regarding the case. Melissa's defense team was pushing for a plea deal, hoping to reduce her potential sentence by testifying against Dr. Wilcox. The prosecutor wanted Lucas's input before proceeding. It was a position of power he hadn't sought but now held, the ability to influence his ex-wife's future. The vindictive path would be to oppose any deal to ensure she served the maximum sentence possible. But Lucas had never been motivated by vengeance, only by protection. His phone rang. Colonel Peters. Thought you'd want to know, the colonel said without preamble. The DEA task force found 3 more hospitals where Wilcox was running his prescription scam. This goes way beyond your wife, Lucas. He's been doing this for years. With different accomplices? Lucas asked. Looks that way. They've identified 2 other nurses who participated. Both claim they were coerced, threatened with termination if they didn't cooperate. Was Melissa coerced? No evidence of that, Peters replied. All indications point to her as a willing participant. The money trail is particularly damning. Her signature on those offshore transfers can't be explained away. Lucas absorbed this information silently. What are you thinking? Peters pressed. I'm thinking my children have suffered enough, Lucas said finally. If Melissa accepts responsibility for her actions and testifies truthfully against Wilcox, I won't oppose a reduced sentence. That's surprisingly merciful, given what she did. It's not mercy, Lucas corrected. It's pragmatism. My children need closure, not a prolonged legal battle. And I need to focus on rebuilding their trust, not pursuing retribution against their mother. After ending the call, Lucas drafted an email to Victoria outlining his position. He would not actively advocate for leniency, but neither would he stand in the way if Melissa demonstrated genuine remorse and cooperation. As he prepared to send the email, a text message arrived from Dominic. New development. Wilcox's ex-wife contacted me. Says she has information you need to hear. Meeting arranged for tomorrow, 10 a.m., usual place. Lucas's interest was piqued. Catherine Wilcox had divorced Nathaniel 8 years earlier after a bitter public battle that had made local headlines. What information could she possibly have that would be relevant now? The following morning, after dropping his children at school, Lucas arrived at the small coffee shop where he occasionally met Dominic for updates. Catherine Wilcox was already there, an elegant woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp eyes that assessed Lucas as he approached. Mrs. Wilcox, he greeted her, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me. It's Ms. Monroe now, she corrected, accepting his handshake. I reverted to my maiden name after the divorce. And thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Lucas sat across from her. Dominic mentioned you have information. Yes. Catherine, or rather, Ms. Monroe, opened her handbag and removed a flash drive. 12 years of financial records Nathaniel thought I didn't keep. Offshore accounts, shell companies, property purchases under assumed names. A complete roadmap of his financial crimes. Lucas stared at the flash drive. Why give this to me now? Why not take it to the authorities years ago? Our divorce settlement included a non-disclosure agreement, she explained. I received a substantial payment in exchange for my silence. But that agreement had a clause. If Nathaniel was ever charged with a felony, the NDA would be void. And now he has been, Lucas observed. Exactly. A small, satisfied smile curved her lips. I've been waiting 8 years for this moment, Mr. Davenport. 8 years watching him move on to new victims while I remain bound by legal constraints. Victims, Lucas repeated. Catherine's expression hardened. Your wife isn't the first woman Nathaniel has manipulated into criminal activity. There was a pharmaceutical rep before her, a hospital administrator before that, and me at the beginning. His pattern is consistent. Find a woman with access to something he wants, charm her, involve her in his schemes, then discard her when she becomes a liability. And you have evidence of all this? She tapped the flash drive. Everything, including recorded conversations in which he discusses his methodology quite explicitly. Lucas took the flash drive, turning it over in his fingers. Why bring this to me instead of the prosecutor? Because the prosecutor is only concerned with the current charges, Catherine explained. You, however, have a different motivation. You want to protect your children from ever being manipulated by Nathaniel again. This evidence ensures he'll never be in a position to harm anyone in your family. Lucas studied her. You've done your research on me. Thoroughly, she acknowledged. I know about your military career, your intelligence background, your reputation for strategic thinking. I know you're not motivated by revenge, but by security. And I know that, unlike me, you won't be silenced by an NDA or intimidated by threats. What do you want in return? Lucas asked directly. Nothing, Catherine replied. Consider it a gift from one of Nathaniel's victims to another. Or rather, to your wife, who, despite her willing participation, was still playing a role in his script. Lucas pocketed the flash drive. I'll have this information verified and then forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Naturally, Catherine agreed. Due diligence is important, but you'll find everything is meticulously documented. I was an accountant before I married Nathaniel. Record keeping is second nature to me. As they parted ways, Catherine offered one final observation. You know, Mr. Davenport, there's a certain satisfaction in watching someone who believes themselves untouchable finally face consequences. I imagine you understand that feeling. I do, Lucas acknowledged. But it's a hollow satisfaction. Perhaps, she conceded. But it's better than the alternative, watching them continue to destroy lives without consequences. Lucas couldn't argue with that assessment. The evidence Catherine provided proved transformative in both cases. Over the next 2 weeks, faced with the overwhelming documentation of his past crimes, Dr. Wilcox accepted a plea deal that would keep him in prison for 20 years. As part of the agreement, he admitted that Melissa had joined his operation only in the past 2 years, not as its architect, but as a participant. This clarification, combined with Melissa's full cooperation, resulted in a reduced sentence for her, 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. Still a substantial punishment, but not the decade-plus she had been facing. When Victoria called with the news, Lucas received it without comment. This is the best outcome we could have hoped for, Victoria assured him. Wilcox will be incarcerated well into his 60s. His medical license is permanently revoked, and Melissa's sentence, while significant, allows for the possibility that she might repair her relationship with your children while they're still relatively young. If they want that relationship, Lucas noted. Of course, Victoria agreed. That will be entirely their choice. But the opportunity will exist, which I think is important for their long-term emotional health. After ending the call, Lucas found himself on the back porch, staring at the mountains in the distance. The legal battles were concluding. The immediate threats were neutralized. Now came a harder part, helping his children heal from wounds that no court could address. Nora joined him, wrapped in a sweater against the evening chill. Is it over? She asked simply. The legal part is mostly over, Lucas confirmed. Your mother accepted a plea deal today. 8 years, possibly less with good behavior. Nora absorbed this silently, then said, she wants us to visit. She's been writing letters. I know, Lucas acknowledged. Have you decided if you want to see her? Not yet. Nora leaned against the porch railing. Part of me misses her. Another part is so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. Is that normal? Completely normal, Lucas assured her. There's no right way to feel about this, Nora. Whatever you're experiencing is valid. What about you? She asked, echoing Aiden's earlier question. How do you feel? Lucas considered his answer carefully. I feel determined, he said finally. Determined to be here for you and your brother. Determined to rebuild what was broken. Determined to ensure nothing like this ever threatens our family again. Nora studied him. You don't hate her? Hate requires emotional investment, Lucas explained. And I've chosen to invest my emotions elsewhere. In you, in Aiden, in our future together. His daughter nodded slowly, seeming to understand. That's kind of how I want to feel too. Like mom just doesn't matter anymore. Not in a mean way, but in a moving on way. That's a healthy perspective, Lucas told her. And it's okay if you're not there yet. Healing takes time. As they stood together watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Lucas felt a quiet certainty that they would be all right. Not immediately, not perfectly, but eventually and authentically. The family they rebuilt might look different from what they'd had before, but it would be stronger, more honest, and ultimately more resilient. That night, after Nora and Aiden had gone to bed, Lucas sat at his desk and composed a letter, not to Melissa, but to his children. A letter they wouldn't receive until years later, when they were adults and could fully understand the choices he'd made on their behalf. My dear Aiden and Nora, by the time you read this, the events of 2023 will be distant memories, but their impact on our family will have shaped who we've all become. I want you to know that every decision I made during that difficult time was guided by a single purpose, protecting your future. Your mother made choices I could not forgive. Not because I lack compassion, but because forgiveness would have signaled that such betrayals were acceptable. They were not. They never will be. Some might call my response to her actions harsh or unforgiving. Perhaps it was. But in life, we must establish boundaries that cannot be crossed without consequences. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is respect for ourselves and for the trust others place in us. I hope that, as adults, you've found your own balance between compassion and self-protection. I hope you've learned to forgive when it served your heart, but to stand firm when forgiveness would only invite further harm. Most of all, I hope you know how deeply you are loved, not just by me, but by all who have the privilege of knowing the remarkable people you've become. With enduring love, Dad. Lucas sealed the letter and placed it in a fireproof safe along with other important documents. Then he turned out the lights and prepared for bed, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 2 years after Melissa's sentencing, Lucas stood in the crowded gymnasium of Riverdale High School, applauding as Aiden crossed the stage to receive his diploma. Now 18, his son had grown into a young man of remarkable character, thoughtful, resilient, and fiercely loyal to those who earned his trust. Beside Lucas, 16-year-old Nora cheered loudly for her brother, her face alight with pride. She had blossomed in her own right, excelling both academically and athletically, recently named captain of the varsity soccer team. As Aiden rejoined them after the ceremony, Lucas embraced him tightly. Congratulations, son. I couldn't be prouder. Thanks, Dad. Aiden's smile was genuine, a stark contrast to the angry, confused teenager he'd been 2 years earlier. We should get moving if we're going to make our dinner reservation, Nora reminded them, already heading toward the exit. The celebration at Aiden's favorite restaurant was perfect. Good food, easy conversation, and the comfortable rhythm of a family that had found its balance. When Aiden opened Lucas's gift, a vintage military compass that had belonged to Lucas's grandfather, his eyes widened in recognition. You always said this was your most treasured possession, he said, turning the brass instrument in his hands. It was, Lucas confirmed. Now it's yours. A reminder that even when the path forward isn't clear, you have the tools to find your way. Later that evening, after Nora had gone to bed, Aiden lingered in the living room with Lucas, something clearly weighing on his mind. Everything okay? Lucas asked. Aiden hesitated, then said, I got a letter from Mom last week. She's up for her first parole hearing next month. Lucas nodded. He'd received formal notification as the victim of record. How do you feel about that? Conflicted, Aiden admitted. Part of me thinks she's served enough time. Another part. He trailed off. Isn't ready to have her back in your life. Lucas finished for him. Yeah. Aiden looked relieved at the understanding. Is that terrible? Not at all, Lucas assured him. Your feelings are valid, Aiden. And whatever you decide, whether to reconnect with your mother or maintain distance, I'll support you. What about you? Aiden asked. Will you oppose her parole? Lucas had given this considerable thought. No, he said finally. I won't actively oppose it, but neither will I advocate for it. The parole board will make their decision based on her behavior and rehabilitation, not my input. Aiden nodded slowly. That seems fair. The important thing, Lucas continued, is that regardless of their decision, our family remains solid. Your mother's potential release doesn't change who we are or what we've built together. The following week brought unexpected news, not about Melissa, but about Dr. Wilcox. He had been killed in a prison altercation, allegedly after information about his crimes against children through prescription fraud had circulated among inmates. The man who had nearly destroyed the Davenport family was gone. Lucas received the news with complex emotions. As a soldier, he had taken lives in combat, but never derived satisfaction from death. Yet he couldn't deny the sense of closure that came with knowing Nathaniel Wilcox would never again threaten his family or manipulate others. He shared the news with his children carefully, emphasizing that while they might feel various emotions about Wilcox's death, celebrating it would be inappropriate. I don't feel happy about it, Nora said thoughtfully, but I don't feel sad either. Is that wrong? No, Lucas assured her. It's a measured response to someone who caused significant harm. Do you think it will affect Mom's parole hearing? Aiden asked. Possibly, Lucas acknowledged. Without Wilcox's influence, the board might view her as less likely to reoffend. The prediction proved accurate. 1 month later, Melissa was granted parole with strict conditions, regular check-ins with a parole officer, mandatory counseling, and various restrictions on her movement and employment. She would be released in 2 weeks. The news arrived as the Davenports were preparing for another milestone, Aiden's departure for college. He had been accepted to the United States Naval Academy, a choice that had initially surprised Lucas, but one he fully supported. Will you be okay with Mom out while I'm gone? Aiden asked as they packed his belongings. I mean, with just you and Nora here? The concern in his son's voice touched Lucas deeply. We'll be fine, Aiden. Your mother has no legal right to approach either of you without permission, and she knows better than to test those boundaries with me. Still, Aiden persisted. If she tries anything, she won't, Lucas said firmly. But if she does, I'm more than capable of handling it. Focus on your education and training. That's your mission now. The day Melissa was released coincided with Aiden's departure for Annapolis. Whether this timing was deliberately engineered by Melissa's legal team or merely coincidental, Lucas couldn't say. But he appreciated that it spared Aiden an immediate decision about whether to see his mother. Nora, however, faced that choice directly. Melissa had sent a letter requesting a meeting, a careful, tentative invitation that acknowledged Nora's right to refuse. What should I do, Dad? Nora asked, showing him the letter. Lucas handed it back without comment. That's entirely your decision, Nora. I won't influence you either way. She studied him. But you still won't see her. No, Lucas confirmed. My position hasn't changed. Because you don't believe she's really sorry? Because some breaches of trust can't be repaired, Lucas explained. Your relationship with your mother is different from mine. You should make your own choice based on what feels right for you. After several days of consideration, Nora decided to meet Melissa at a neutral location, a public park with Lucas waiting at a discreet distance. The reunion was brief, and from what Nora later shared, awkward but not hostile. She's different, Nora observed that evening. Quieter. Less. Polished. Prison changes people, Lucas said neutrally. She asked about you, Nora continued. Want to know if you were dating anyone. What did you tell her? The truth. That you've had a few dates, but nothing serious. Nora grinned. Though I think Ms. Rivera from my math department is hoping to change that. Lucas smiled but didn't take the bait. His few ventures into dating had been cautious and private. Creating stability for his children had been his priority, not rebuilding his romantic life. Mom also asked if she could come to my games sometimes. Nora continued, her expression growing serious. I said I'd think about it. And will you? Lucas asked. Maybe. Eventually. Nora shrugged. I'm not ready to have her that involved yet. But I might be someday. That's a healthy approach. Lucas approved. Take your time. Set your boundaries. Life settled into a new rhythm. Aiden thrived at the Naval Academy, calling weekly with updates. Nora maintained cautious, limited contact with Melissa, occasional meetings, always in public places, always on Nora's terms. Lucas focused on his work and his relationship with his daughter, creating a home environment where she continued to flourish. Then, 6 months after Melissa's release, Lucas received an unexpected visitor at his office. Graham Phillips, Melissa's original divorce attorney, requested a private meeting. Mr. Davenport, Phillips began once they were seated in Lucas's office. I represent a client who wishes to purchase your property in Aspen. Lucas raised an eyebrow. I don't own property in Aspen. Not directly, Phillips acknowledged. It's held in a trust established by your grandfather. The same trust your ex-wife and Dr. Wilcox attempted to misappropriate. I'm aware of the trust, Lucas said carefully. But it doesn't own Aspen property. Phillips smiled thinly. Actually it does. When the authorities investigated the misappropriation, they discovered that while your wife and Dr. Wilcox had diverted funds, those funds were ultimately used to purchase legitimate assets. The court restored those assets to the trust. This was news to Lucas. He'd been so focused on the criminal proceedings and his children's well-being that he'd left the financial restoration details to the forensic accountants. So there's a property in Aspen that legally belongs to my children's trust fund, Lucas summarized. And your client wants to buy it. Yes, Phillips confirmed. For substantially more than market value. Why? The property has sentimental significance to my client. Understanding dawned. Your client is Melissa. Phillips didn't confirm or deny. The offer is $7.2 million. The property was purchased for $5 million using diverted funds. Lucas leaned back, considering. The trust was established for his children's education and future security. A premium of over $2 million would significantly enhance that security. I'll need to consult with the trustee, Lucas said finally. Of course, Phillips agreed, sliding a business card across the desk. Please have them contact me directly with any questions. After Phillips left, Lucas called Victoria Reeves, who confirmed the property's existence and its legal status. The prosecution kept it quiet during the criminal proceedings, she explained. They were focused on establishing guilt, not asset recovery. But yes, the Aspen property was purchased with trust funds and has been legally restored to the trust. And the offer is legitimate. $7.2 million is well above market value, Victoria confirmed. From a purely financial perspective, it's an excellent deal for your children's trust. But the buyer is almost certainly Melissa, Lucas noted, which raises other considerations, such as why she wants this particular property so badly, what her true motives are. Victoria was silent for a moment. Lucas, I've represented you through this entire ordeal. I've seen firsthand how Melissa's actions devastated your family. If you want to reject this offer on principle, I would understand completely. It's not my money to refuse, Lucas pointed out. It belongs to Aiden and Nora. Then perhaps you should discuss it with them, Victoria suggested. They're old enough to have input on decisions affecting their future. That evening, Lucas arranged a video call with Aiden and had Nora join them in the living room. He explained the situation as neutrally as possible, presenting the financial facts without speculation about Melissa's motives. So Mom wants to buy this house she picked out with Dr. Wilcox. Nora clarified, her expression dubious. Apparently, Lucas confirmed. Using money she doesn't have. Aiden added from the screen of Lucas's laptop. Where is she getting $7 million? That's a valid question, Lucas acknowledged. One I intend to have answered before any sale proceeds. But if everything checks out, Nora persisted, would we sell? Lucas looked between his children. That's what I wanted to discuss with you both. This is your trust fund, your future. The decision should reflect your wishes. Aiden and Nora exchanged a glance through the video call. I think we should sell, Aiden said finally. Not for Mom's sake, but for ours. That much additional money in the trust would secure Nora's college education, and then some. I agree, Nora nodded. But I have one condition. What's that? Lucas asked. We never set foot in that house, Nora said firmly. I don't want any part of something Mom and Dr. Wilcox picked out together while they were stealing from us. Agreed, Aiden said immediately. Lucas nodded, proud of their mature perspective. Then I'll have Victoria proceed with the sale, contingent on verification of the fund's source. The investigation into Melissa's finances revealed an unexpected source for the purchase money, a life insurance policy on Dr. Wilcox that named Melissa as beneficiary. The policy had been established years before they met, with his first wife as the original beneficiary, but never updated through subsequent marriages. The irony wasn't lost on Lucas. Nathaniel Wilcox, who had manipulated and ultimately betrayed Melissa, was now posthumously funding her desires. After thorough legal review, the sale proceeded. The trust received the full amount, which was immediately diversified into more stable investments. The property in Aspen transferred to Melissa's ownership with no further connection to the Davenport family. Lucas never asked why the property meant so much to her. Some questions were better left unanswered. 5 years later, Lucas stood with Nora on another graduation stage, this time at Stanford University, where she had just received her degree in biomedical engineering. Aiden, now a commissioned officer in the Navy, stood beside them in his dress uniform. They posed for photos, their smiles genuine, their bonds stronger than ever. The journey from that devastating text message to this moment of triumph had been arduous, filled with pain and difficult choices. But they had emerged not just intact but transformed, more resilient, more honest with themselves and each other, more appreciative of the family they had rebuilt. As they left the ceremony, Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations to Nora. You've raised remarkable children. M. Lucas read the message but didn't respond. Some boundaries remained absolute. That evening, as he watched Aiden and Nora laughing together at dinner, Lucas reflected on the lessons of the past 7 years. He had discovered his own capacity for ruthlessness when his family was threatened. He had learned that protection sometimes required hard choices with painful consequences. And he had confirmed what he'd always believed, that some betrayals could never be forgiven. But he had also discovered something unexpected, that unforgiveness didn't have to equal bitterness, that maintaining boundaries didn't require maintaining anger, that moving forward didn't necessarily mean reconciliation, but it did require release. He had released Melissa from his life completely. He had released the need for further retribution. He had released the marriage and the dreams it once represented. What he had kept was what mattered most: his children, his integrity, and the knowledge that when tested, he had done what was necessary to protect his family, without hesitation, without compromise, and without regret. The text Melissa had sent years ago still lived in his phone. This isn't over, Lucas. You've destroyed everything I built. I'll never forgive you for this. His reply then had been silence. His reply now, if he were inclined to give one, would be simple. Understood. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Perfect Gift. Glenn Coleman stood in the doorway of his bedroom, coffee mug in hand, watching his wife Melanie arrange the exotic plant she'd brought home the evening before. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows caught the plant's unusual purple-black leaves, making them shimmer with an almost metallic sheen. It's beautiful, isn't it? Melanie said, stepping back to admire her purchase. The woman at the botanical garden said it was incredibly rare. Apparently, it only blooms once every few years, and when it does, she paused dramatically. The flowers are supposed to be absolutely stunning. Glenn nodded, though something about the plant unsettled him. Its leaves seemed too perfect, too symmetrical, and there was an odd sweet smell emanating from it that reminded him of rotting fruit masked by perfume. But Melanie looked so pleased with herself, and after the year they'd had, his promotion at the engineering firm, her successful launch of the interior design business, finally getting their twins into the private school they'd wanted, he didn't want to dampen her spirits. "What's it called?" he asked, setting his mug on the dresser and walking over to examine it more closely. "Belladonna Nocturne," Melanie replied, running her fingers gently along one of the leaves. "Isn't that romantic?" The lady said. "It means beautiful lady of the night." Glenn's engineering mind kicked in as he studied the plant structure. The root system seemed unusually robust for a decorative plant, and the soil looked different from typical potting mix, darker, more organic. "Where exactly did you get this?" "I thought you said the botanical garden, but—" "Well, not the main one downtown. There's this specialty place about an hour north. Galloway Botanical Specialties. The owner, Aurora Galloway, she has the most incredible collection of rare plants. She said this one was perfect for our bedroom because it releases oxygen at night instead of carbon dioxide like most plants." "That's unusual," Glenn mused. Most plants he knew have switched to releasing CO2 at night. Did she mention anything about care instructions? Special fertilizer, watering schedule? Melanie laughed, the sound light and musical. "You, in your engineering brain, always needing to understand how everything works." She said it's very low maintenance. Just water it once a week and keep it in indirect sunlight. Glenn's phone buzzed with a text from his business partner at Coleman Burton Engineering. Wesley Burton had been his closest friend since college, and their small but successful firm had been built on their combined expertise. Glenn's structural engineering background and Wesley's environmental engineering specialization, which included a deep knowledge of botany and plant biology. "Wes wants to meet for lunch today," Glenn said, scrolling through the message. "Says he has some concerns about the Morrison project." "That's fine. Emma and Ethan have soccer practice after school anyway, so I'll be late getting home." Melanie glanced at her watch. "Speaking of which, I need to get them ready. Can you help Emma find her cleats? I think they're in the garage." As Glenn headed toward the garage, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the plant. On impulse, he pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo. Wesley would know if there was anything unusual about it. The morning routine proceeded as normal. Breakfast chaos with the 8-year-old twins, Emma's last-minute panic about a science project, Ethan's refusal to wear anything but his lucky jersey. Glenn dropped them off at Riverside Private Academy, the exclusive school they'd worked so hard to get the kids into. The tuition was astronomical, but the education and connections would set Emma and Ethan up for life. At the office, Glenn tried to focus on the structural calculations for the Morrison high-rise, but his mind kept drifting back to the plant. Something about Melanie's story didn't quite add up. She was usually so detail-oriented about her purchases, especially expensive ones, but she'd been vague about the cost and location. Around 11:30, his phone rang. Wesley's name flashed on the screen. "Glenn, I need to see you right now." "Where are you?" "At the office." "Wes, what?" "I'm coming up. Don't go anywhere." The line went dead. Glenn stared at his phone, confused by his partner's urgent tone. Wesley was typically the more laid-back of the two, the one who kept Glenn grounded when his engineering perfectionism threatened to derail projects. 5 minutes later, Wesley burst through the office door, his usually neat brown hair disheveled, his face pale with panic. "Where did you get this plant?" he demanded, holding up Glenn's phone with the photo displayed. "Melanie bought it yesterday." "Why? What's wrong?" Wesley sank in a chair across from Glenn's desk, his hands shaking. "Glenn, this isn't just any exotic plant. If I'm right about what this is..." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "We need to get your family out of that house. Now." Glenn felt a chill run down his spine. "You're scaring me, Wes. What exactly are you talking about?" "This plant. I've only seen it in research papers, and those were classified. It's called Somnolentia mortis. The common name, when people bother to give it one, is the widow's lure. Widow's lure? That's not what Melanie said it was called. Because whoever sold it to her lied. Glenn, this plant doesn't exist in any legitimate botanical garden. It's been banned from cultivation in most countries because it's incredibly dangerous. Wesley leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The plant releases a cocktail of airborne toxins, especially at night. The initial exposure causes euphoria and deep sleep, but continued exposure over several weeks leads to organ failure, starting with the liver and kidneys. Glenn's blood ran cold. Are you saying someone is trying to poison my family? I'm saying someone has placed a biological weapon in your bedroom, designed to kill you slowly and make it look like natural causes. The question is who and why. Glenn stood up abruptly, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall. I need to call Melanie, get her and the kids out of the house. Wait. Wesley grabbed his arm. If we're dealing with someone sophisticated enough to acquire this plant, we need to be smart about this. They might be watching, waiting to see if you discover what it is. If you suddenly evacuate your family, they might escalate to more direct methods. Glenn's mind raced through the possibilities. Who would want to harm his family? His engineering firm had no major enemies, no disgruntled clients who would resort to murder. Melanie's interior design business was successful, but hardly controversial. They lived quietly, paid their taxes, coached Little League on weekends. There's something else, Wesley continued. The plant's care requirements. It needs to be watered with a specific nutrient solution to maintain its toxicity. Whoever gave this to Melanie either provided that solution disguised as regular plant food, or they have a way to access your house regularly to maintain it. The implications hit Glenn like a physical blow. Someone had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Someone with access to illegal biological materials. Someone who knew their routines well enough to know that Melanie would place a bedroom plant exactly where it would do the most damage. We need to find out where she really got this plant, Glenn said, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. This Aurora Galloway, whoever she is, she's either the person trying to kill us or she's working for them. Wesley nodded grimly. I'll start researching the plant source networks, see if I can trace where something like this might have come from. But Glenn, we can't let on that we know. If they realize we're onto them, they might try something more immediate, Glenn finished. He thought of Emma and Ethan, probably sitting in their afternoon classes, unaware that someone wanted them dead. The protective fury that surged through him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Don't worry, Wes. Whoever is behind this made one critical mistake. What's that? Glenn's expression hardened, the easygoing family man replaced by something far more dangerous. They picked the wrong family to mess with. I spent 4 years in Army Corps of Engineers before college, and I didn't build a successful business by backing down from problems. They want to play games with my family's lives? I'll show them what a real engineer can do when someone threatens what matters most to him. Wesley had never seen this side of his partner before, but he recognized the cold calculation in Glenn's eyes. What do you want me to do? Keep researching the plant. I'm going to pay a visit to this Galloway Botanical Specialties. But first, I need to figure out how to neutralize the thing in my bedroom without alerting whoever put it there. Actually, Wesley said, pulling out his laptop, I might have an idea about that. If we can't remove it without raising suspicions, maybe we can sabotage it from the inside. Chapter 2. The investigation begins. That evening, Glenn watched from his home office as Melanie moved around the bedroom, completely unaware of the danger lurking 3 feet from where she slept. He'd convinced Wesley to come over for dinner, ostensibly to discuss the Morrison project, but really so his partner could get a closer look at the plant and the surrounding area. The soil composition is definitely altered, Wesley murmured as they stood in the bedroom doorway after Melanie had gone downstairs to help Emma with homework. Look at the drainage system. This isn't a normal potting setup. Someone modified this specifically for optimal toxin release. Glenn examined the base of the pot more carefully. These aren't regular drainage holes. They're positioned to create airflow patterns. Whoever set this up knows exactly what they're doing. There's something else, Wesley said, kneeling beside the plant. See these white crystals mixed in with the soil? That's not fertilizer. It's a chemical accelerant designed to enhance the plant's natural toxin production. So they're not just trying to poison us slowly, they're trying to make sure it works fast. Wesley nodded grimly. Based on the concentration, I'd say you have maybe 2 weeks before serious symptoms start showing. 3 weeks before. He didn't need to finish. Glenn felt his jaw clench. We need to know who we're dealing with. Tonight, after everyone's asleep, I'm going to install some surveillance equipment. If someone's been coming into our house to maintain this thing, I want to know when and how. What about Melanie? Are you going to tell her? Glenn had been wrestling with this question all day. Not yet. She's not good at hiding her emotions, and if whoever's behind this is watching, they'll know something's changed. Besides, I need more information before I can protect her properly. They went downstairs to join the family for dinner, Glenn forcing normalcy into his voice as he asked Emma about her science project and listened to Ethan's detailed recap of soccer practice. But his mind was elsewhere, analyzing every person who'd been in their house recently, every routine that someone could have observed, every enemy he might have made. After dinner, while Melanie supervised the kids' homework and bedtime routines, Glenn excused himself to his home office. He pulled up the property records for Galloway Botanical Specialties, running the address through every database he had access to through his engineering firm's research subscriptions. The results were disturbing. The property had been purchased 6 months ago by Aurora Galloway, but Aurora Galloway had died in a car accident in Oregon 2 years earlier. Whoever was using her identity had done their homework, but not quite well enough to fool a thorough background check. Glenn dug deeper, cross-referencing the property purchase with shell companies, looking for any connection to his own life. What he found made his blood run cold. The property purchase had been financed through a loan from Riverside Financial Group, the same company that held the mortgage on their house and had processed the loan for Emma and Ethan's private school tuition. Someone with access to their financial information had been planning this for months. Glenn's hands moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, pulling up every interaction they'd had with Riverside Financial, every employee they'd dealt with, every piece of personal information they'd provided. The pattern that emerged was subtle but undeniable. 3 different interactions over the past year. The school loan, a refinancing inquiry Melanie had made, and a consultation about a home equity line of credit had all been handled by the same person, Mitchell Walker, Senior Financial Advisor. Glenn pulled up Walker's employee profile and felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Walker had been with Riverside Financial for 8 years, had access to detailed financial records of high-net-worth clients, and according to his LinkedIn profile, had previously worked for a company that had been involved in a major lawsuit with Coleman Burton Engineering 3 years earlier. The lawsuit had been over a construction defect in a residential development. Glenn and Wesley's firm had been hired as expert witnesses to prove that the defects were caused by shoddy construction practices, not engineering flaws. Their testimony had cost the construction company millions in damages and led to several executives facing criminal charges. Mitchell Walker had been the project finance manager for that construction company. "I've got you, you son of a bitch," Glenn muttered, printing out every document he could find linking Walker to both the failed development and Riverside Financial. His phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. "Found something. The plant's source network traces back to a lab in Mexico that was shut down last year for illegal bioweapons research. Someone with serious connections provided this." Glenn typed back, "I know who. Meet me tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Coffee shop on 5th Street. I'll explain everything." He spent the next hour setting up a hidden camera system in the bedroom, using equipment left over from a security consultation his firm had done for a corporate client. The cameras were practically invisible, designed to look like smoke detector components and electrical outlet covers. If someone was coming into their house to maintain the plant, he would know about it. That night, Glenn lay in bed listening to Melanie's peaceful breathing, the deadly plant just a few feet away releasing its invisible poison into the air. But instead of fear, he felt something else building in his chest, a cold, calculating rage that reminded him of his military training. Whoever Mitchell Walker was working with, whatever their ultimate goal, they had made a fundamental miscalculation. They thought they were dealing with a soft, suburban family man who would never see the threat coming. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Around 2 a.m., The hidden cameras picked up movement. Glenn watched from his home office as a figure in dark clothing entered through the back door, a door that should have been locked. The intruder moved with practiced efficiency, knowing exactly where to go and what to do. The figure was small and slight, definitely female, wearing a ski mask and gloves. She went directly to the bedroom, spent 5 minutes doing something to the plant Glenn couldn't quite see from the camera angle, then disappeared the same way she'd come. Glenn checked the locks after she left. No signs of forced entry, which meant she had a key. In the morning, after Melanie and the kids left for their daily routines, Glenn examined the plant more closely. Fresh white crystals had been added to the soil, and the leaves looked healthier, more vibrant. Someone was definitely maintaining the plant to ensure maximum lethality. Glenn's phone rang as he was photographing the new evidence. "Glenn, get your kids and get out of that house. Leave everything." It was Wesley, and his voice was pure panic. "What's wrong?" Glenn shouted into the phone. "I just got a call from my contact at the CDC. Someone reported a suspicious plant inquiry from our area. They're sending a team to investigate." "Glenn, if they find that plant in your house, they'll quarantine your entire family and everyone you've been in contact with." But that's not the worst part. Glenn's chest tightened. "What?" The report came from Mitchell Walker at Riverside Financial. "He's playing both sides, poisoning you slowly while setting up a cover story for why your family gets sick. When the CDC finds the plant, it'll look like you acquired it illegally yourself, maybe for some kind of insurance fraud scheme." Glenn felt the world tilt around him. "How long do we have?" "Maybe an hour. 2 at most." "This ends now," Glenn said, his voice deadly calm. "Wes, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. We're going to turn this whole thing around on them." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Mitchell Walker and his friends are about to learn what happens when you threaten a combat engineer's family. Get over here now and bring every piece of documentation we have on the original lawsuit. It's time to go on the offense." As Glenn hung up the phone, he looked at the deadly plant one more time. Soon, it would be evidence in a very different kind of case than Walker had planned. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 3. The trap is set. Glenn had 30 minutes before Wesley arrived and maybe an hour before the CDC team showed up, if Walker was telling the truth about the timeline. He moved through his house with military precision, collecting evidence, photographing everything, and preparing for what would either be the smartest gambit of his life or a spectacular disaster. First, he retrieved the soil samples Wesley had secretly taken the night before and sealed them in evidence bags with timestamps and location data. Then he printed out every financial document linking Walker to both Riverside Financial and the construction company that had lost the lawsuit 3 years earlier. The key to any successful trap was understanding your enemy's psychology. Walker thought he was dealing with a typical suburban target, someone who would panic when confronted with authority figures and would be too confused to mount an effective defense. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Glenn's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "CDC team ETA, 45 minutes. Suggest you prepare explanations for illegal botanical acquisition." So Walker was monitoring his communications. Glenn smiled grimly and typed back, "Thanks for the heads up. Family evacuated to hotel as precaution. Will cooperate fully with investigation." It was a lie, of course. Melanie and the kids were safely at their respective schools and activities, but Walker didn't need to know that. Let him think his plan was working perfectly. Wesley arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a briefcase full of documents and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Tell me you have a plan," he said, setting the briefcase on Glenn's kitchen table. "I do, but it's going to require perfect timing and a lot of trust." Glenn spread out a detailed floor plan of the house he'd drawn that morning. "The CDC team will want to examine the plant and the bedroom. When they do, they're going to find evidence that someone has been maintaining it with illegal chemical enhancers." "Right, but they'll assume it was us. Not if we give them a better explanation." Glenn pointed to marked locations on the floor plan. "I've planted evidence that will lead them to the truth, but only if they know where to look. That's where you come in." Wesley examined the floor plan. "What kind of evidence?" "The hidden cameras caught our midnight visitor last night. But more importantly, I set up motion sensors throughout the house this morning. If someone tries to enter while we're dealing with the CDC, we'll have real-time proof that the threat is external. You think Walker will try something while the CDC is here? I'm counting on it. His whole plan depends on us being too panicked and confused to mount a coherent defense. He'll want to ensure the evidence is exactly where the CDC expects to find it. Glenn's expression hardened. What he doesn't know is that I've replaced the chemical enhancers with harmless plant food and hidden the real evidence where he'll never think to look. Wesley was beginning to understand. You're going to let him walk into his own trap. Exactly, but we need to be smart about this. When the CDC team arrives, we cooperate completely. We tell them the truth, that Melanie bought the plant from Galloway Botanical Specialties, that we only discovered its true nature yesterday, and that we suspect someone has been using it as a weapon against our family. And if they don't believe us, Glenn pulled out his laptop and showed Wesley the financial trail he'd uncovered. Then we show them this. Walker's connection to the original lawsuit, the suspicious timing of our interactions with Riverside Financial, and the fact that Aurora Galloway died 2 years ago. 20 minutes later, Glenn watched through his office window as 2 black SUVs pulled into his driveway. For people in CDC hazmat suits emerged, along with 2 agents in dark suits who were definitely not medical personnel. Glenn's doorbell rang precisely at 11 a.m. Mr. Coleman? I'm Dr. Sarah Chun from the Centers for Disease Control. We've received a report about a potentially dangerous biological specimen in your home. Glenn opened the door wide, projecting calm cooperation. Thank you for coming so quickly. My partner and I discovered the plant's true nature yesterday, and we've been trying to figure out what to do. Dr. Chun raised an eyebrow. Your partner? Wesley Burton. He's an environmental engineer with botanical expertise. He identified the plant from a photograph. The CDC team followed Glenn into his house, Wesley trailing behind with his briefcase of documentation. Glenn watched their faces as they entered the bedroom and saw the plant. My God, Dr. Chun breathed. How long has this been in your house? 3 days, Glenn replied. My wife purchased it from a place called Galloway Botanical Specialties. We can provide you with all the details. One of the suited agents stepped forward. Mr. Coleman, I'm Agent Rodriguez with the FBI. We're going to need you to walk us through exactly how you acquired this specimen. Glenn had been expecting this. The FBI's involvement meant Walker had spun this as a potential terrorism case, not just a health hazard. Of course, Glenn said. But first, I need to show you something that I think will change your perspective on what's really happening here. He led them to his office and pulled up the financial records on his computer. 3 years ago, my engineering firm provided expert testimony in a lawsuit that cost Hartwell Construction Company millions of dollars. The project finance manager for that company was Mitchell Walker. 6 months ago, Walker began handling all of our family's financial accounts through Riverside Financial Group. 3 days ago, my wife purchased this plant from a woman using the identity of Aurora Galloway, who died in Oregon 2 years ago. Dr. Chun and Agent Rodriguez exchanged glances. Are you suggesting someone is trying to poison your family in revenge for a business dispute? Rodriguez asked. I'm suggesting you examine the plant's soil composition and compare it to what someone maintaining it would need to bring in regularly, Glenn replied. Wesley opened his briefcase and pulled out chemical analysis reports. The plant's soil contains synthetic enhancers that need to be replenished every few days to maintain toxicity. Someone with access to this house has been maintaining it. Glenn's motion sensors chimed on his phone. Someone was in the house. Agent Rodriguez. Glenn said quietly, someone just entered my house through the back door. The FBI agent immediately radioed for backup while drawing his weapon. The CDC team took cover behind Glenn's desk as armed agents moved through the house. 2 minutes later, they returned with a woman in handcuffs, the same slight figure Glenn had seen on camera the night before. Found her in the bedroom, messing with the plant, one of the agents reported. She had keys to the house and a bag full of chemical compounds. Agent Rodriguez looked at Glenn with newfound respect. Mr. Coleman, how did you know she was coming? Because I've been tracking this conspiracy for the past 24 hours, Glenn replied. And I suspected that whoever was behind it would try to ensure their evidence was perfect before you examined it. The woman in custody was identified as Carrie Hahn, a former lab technician from the Mexican facility that had produced the illegal plant. Financial records quickly revealed payments from Mitchell Walker dating back 6 months. When confronted with the evidence, Hahn broke immediately. Walker had hired her to maintain the plant and had promised her immunity from prosecution for her role in the Mexican lab's illegal activities. The plan had been to slowly poison Glenn's family while setting up a cover story that would make their deaths look like Glenn's own fault. Revenge for a business rival while destroying his reputation posthumously. Agent Rodriguez arrested Mitchell Walker at his office that afternoon. Walker's computer contained detailed plans for the scheme, including backup methods if the plant didn't work quickly enough. But Glenn's trap had one final element. "Agent Rodriguez," he said as they wrapped up the investigation, "I need to ask you to search Walker's home and office for evidence of other ongoing cases. If he was willing to do this to my family over a 3-year-old lawsuit, I suspect we're not his only targets." They found evidence of 4 other families that Walker had been targeting through various means, all clients of Riverside Financial who had somehow cost him money or professional standing in the past. 2 other families had already shown early symptoms of poisoning from plants Walker had arranged for them to receive. Walker's arrest undoubtedly saved multiple lives. That evening, as Glenn sat on his back porch watching Emma and Ethan play in their yard, the deadly plant long since removed by the CDC team, Melanie curled up beside him on their porch swing. "I still can't believe someone tried to kill us over a business dispute," she said softly. "Some people can't handle losing," Glenn replied, wrapping his arm around her. "But they picked the wrong family to mess with." Melanie smiled up at him. "My badass engineer husband, always thinking 10 steps ahead." Glenn kissed the top of her head, thinking about the trap he'd set and how perfectly it had worked. Walker had been so focused on his elaborate revenge scheme that he'd never considered the possibility that his targets might fight back with equal intelligence and considerably more skill. "Just protecting what matters most," he said simply. As the sun set behind their house, Glenn felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with family. Walker and his associates would spend the next several decades in federal prison. The other families Walker had targeted would receive the medical treatment they needed. And the Coleman family would sleep safely in their own beds, no longer threatened by the deadly bloom that had briefly brought such terror into their lives. Sometimes, Glenn reflected, the best revenge was simply being smarter than your enemies and making sure justice was served exactly as it should be. Chapter 4. The Deeper Web. 3 days after Walker's arrest, Glenn thought the nightmare was over. The CDC had cleared their house. Carrie Hahn had pleaded guilty to multiple charges, and Mitchell Walker was being held without bail pending trial. The other families Walker had targeted were recovering under medical supervision, and Glenn's family was trying to return to normal. That's when Wesley called with news that changed everything. "Glenn, we have a problem. A big one." Glenn was in his office, trying to catch up on the work he'd missed during the crisis. "What now?" "I've been going through the financial records the FBI shared with us, trying to understand the full scope of Walker's operation. The money trail goes a lot deeper than we thought." Glenn set down his coffee, suddenly alert. "How deep?" Walker was just middle management. The money for Carrie Hahn, the lab equipment, the property purchase for the fake botanical garden. It all traces back to a shell company called Meridian Holdings. And Meridian Holdings is owned by someone you know. Who? Roland Booth. Glenn felt the room temperature drop 10 degrees. Roland Booth had been the CEO of Hartwell Construction, the man who'd lost everything when Glenn and Wesley's testimony exposed the construction defects 3 years ago. Unlike Walker, who'd simply lost his job, Booth had faced criminal charges, lost his company, and spent 18 months in federal prison. Where is Booth now? That's the thing. He was released 6 months ago, right around the time this whole operation started. Glenn's mind raced through the implications. Walker's plan hadn't been simple revenge. It had been a carefully orchestrated campaign directed by someone with far more resources and motivation. If Booth is behind this, then Walker wasn't the end of it, Glenn realized. He was just the first phase. "There's more," Wesley continued. I found property records showing that Booth has been using various aliases to purchase real estate all around the city. Glenn, he's got properties within 5 miles of the kids' school, Melanie's office, and your gym. Glenn felt that familiar combat readiness flood through his system. He's been watching us, learning our routines, for months, maybe longer. And if the plant was just phase 1, then we need to figure out what phase 2 looks like before it starts. Glenn was already pulling up maps on his computer, marking the locations Wesley had mentioned. Can you get over here? I need to know everything about these properties and what Booth might be planning. An hour later, Wesley arrived with a folder full of surveillance photos he'd taken that morning. They spread everything out on Glenn's dining room table. Property records, financial documents, and photographs of 3 different buildings Booth had purchased under false names. This one concerns me the most, Wesley said, pointing to photos of a warehouse about 2 miles from Riverside Private Academy. It was purchased 4 months ago, and according to utility records, someone's been running high-powered electrical equipment there regularly. Glenn studied the photos. The warehouse was in an industrial area with limited foot traffic, perfect for someone who wanted to operate without observation. What kind of equipment are we talking about? The power consumption patterns suggest laboratory equipment. Maybe manufacturing. Manufacturing what? I don't know. But given what we know about Booth's resources and his access to illegal biological materials, Wesley didn't need to finish the sentence. Glenn's phone rang. The caller ID showed Riverside Private Academy. Mr. Coleman? This is Principal Stevens. I'm calling because we've had some unusual activity around the school today. A man claiming to be conducting a safety inspection was asking detailed questions about our emergency procedures and evacuation routes. When we asked for his credentials, he left abruptly. Glenn's blood turned to ice. Can you describe this man? Medium height, gray hair, maybe 55 years old. He seemed particularly interested in the pickup procedures for your children. Roland Booth was in his mid-50s and had gray hair. Principal Stevens, I need you to implement your highest security protocols immediately. Don't let Emma and Ethan leave the building with anyone except my wife or me. I'll be there in 20 minutes to explain everything. Glenn hung up and looked at Wesley. He's making his move. They drove to the school together, Glenn calling Melanie on the way to warn her to stay away from her office and meet them at the school instead. He didn't tell her why over the phone, just that there was a security concern and she needed to trust him. At Riverside Private Academy, Principal Stevens led them to his office and showed them security camera footage from the morning. The man asking questions was definitely Roland Booth, though he looked different than he had 3 years ago, thinner, harder, with the kind of cold focus that Glenn recognized from his military days. He knew a lot about the school's layout and routines, Principal Stevens said. More than someone conducting a random safety inspection should know. Glenn studied the footage, analyzing Booth's movements and body language. He wasn't here for an inspection. He was doing reconnaissance for something specific. Like what? Wesley asked. Glenn's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice trap with Walker. Too bad he was expendable. Phase 2 begins tonight. Your children are very beautiful when they sleep. Wesley read the message over Glenn's shoulder. Oh God. Glenn immediately called the FBI agent who had handled Walker's case. Agent Rodriguez? We have an escalation. 20 minutes later, Agent Rodriguez arrived at the school with a full security team. Glenn showed him everything they discovered about Booth's involvement and the threatening message. We'll put protection details on your family immediately, Rodriguez said. But Mr. Coleman, I have to ask, is there somewhere safe you can take them until we can locate Booth? Glenn had been thinking about this. My brother Chad lives on a ranch in Wyoming. Military background, defensible location, completely off the grid where Booth is concerned. That might be wise. But Glenn shook his head. No, running won't solve this. Booth has resources, patience, and a 3-year grudge. If we run now, he'll just wait and strike when we least expect it. What are you suggesting? Glenn looked at the security camera footage again, this time focusing on something he'd missed before. In one frame, Booth was checking his watch and looking directly at a specific camera. He hadn't been trying to avoid surveillance. He'd been making sure he was seen. You want us to run, Glenn realized. This whole thing at the school was theater. He's trying to panic us into making mistakes. Agent Rodriguez frowned. That's a pretty sophisticated psychological operation. Roland Booth spent 18 months in federal prison thinking about what he wanted to do to the people who destroyed his life. He had time to plan, time to think, and access to other inmates with specialized skills. Glenn's mind was working through the tactical situation. He's not just after revenge anymore. He wants to completely destroy everything we've built, the same way we destroyed his company. Wesley had been quiet during this exchange, but now he looked up from the financial documents he'd been reviewing. Glenn, look at this. The timing of Booth's property purchases corresponds with specific events in your family's life. He bought the warehouse 2 days after Emma made honor roll. He purchased a house 3 blocks from your neighborhood the week after you got promoted. He's been watching you celebrate your successes and planning to take them away. The psychological profile was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It was about a man who'd lost everything and wanted to make sure Glenn experienced the same systematic destruction. Agent Rodriguez, Glenn said, I need you to understand something. Roland Booth isn't going to stop with threats and biological weapons. He's building towards something bigger, something designed to cause maximum psychological damage while looking like tragic accidents. What do you recommend? Glenn thought about the warehouse, the surveillance, the calculated psychological pressure. We give him exactly what he thinks he wants. We make him believe his plan is working perfectly. I don't understand. Glenn smiled grimly. Roland Booth thinks he's playing chess with a suburban engineer who got lucky once. He's about to learn that some people are much more dangerous when you threaten their families than when you threaten them directly. Wesley recognized that look in his partner's eyes. Glenn, what are you planning? I'm going to give Mr. Booth the war he's been preparing for. But it's going to be fought on my terms, not his. Agent Rodriguez looked between the two engineers. Mr. Coleman, I can't authorize any kind of vigilante operation. You won't have to. Everything I'm going to do will be completely legal and fully documented. But by the time I'm finished, Roland Booth is going to wish he'd stayed in federal prison. Glenn pulled out his phone and started making calls. Chad, it's Glenn. I need to borrow some of your old military equipment, and I need you to come to Denver. Tonight, the war for Glenn Coleman's family was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 5. The Counterattack. That evening, Chad Coleman arrived at Glenn's house carrying a duffel bag and wearing the same predatory smile that had made him legendary in Army Special Operations. The two brothers hadn't seen each other in 6 months, but Glenn knew he could count on Chad when family was threatened. So, Chad said, setting his bag on the kitchen table, some wannabe criminal mastermind thinks he can terrorize my niece and nephew. Glenn brought his brother up to speed on everything. Walker's plant scheme, Booth's involvement, and the psychological warfare that was clearly just beginning. Chad listened with the focused attention of a professional soldier, asking tactical questions and identifying vulnerabilities. This Booth character made a classic mistake, Chad said when Glenn finished. He gave you time to prepare, and he showed you his capabilities before committing to a direct assault. What do you mean? Think about it. The plant was slow-acting, designed to look natural. Walker's arrest exposed the financial trail, which led you to Booth. Then Booth shows up at the school, making barely concealed threats. He's escalating, but he's doing it predictably. Wesley, who had joined them for dinner, looked confused. Isn't that bad for us? If he's escalating, Chad shook his head. It's bad if you're a victim. It's perfect if you're a predator. Glenn understood immediately. You're saying we flip the script. Instead of reacting to his attacks, we start hunting him. Exactly. But we do it smart, legal, documented, and absolutely ruthless within those constraints. Chad opened his duffel bag and revealed an array of surveillance equipment that made Glenn's hidden cameras look like toys. Military-grade night vision, motion sensors, long-range audio equipment, and GPS trackers. All commercially available, all legal to use on your own property or in public spaces. What's the plan? Glenn asked. We turned Booth's own surveillance system against him. He's been watching your family for months, learning your routines. Now we watch him back, learn his routines, and figure out exactly what he's planning for Phase 2. They spent the next 2 hours setting up a comprehensive surveillance network. Chad's experience in covert operations showed in every detail. Camera placements that would be invisible to anyone not trained in counter-surveillance, motion sensors that could track movement patterns across several city blocks, and audio equipment that could pick up conversations from a quarter-mile away. The warehouse is our primary target, Chad said, studying satellite photos on Glenn's computer. If he's manufacturing something there, we need to know what it is. How do we get close enough to find out without breaking any laws? Chad smiled. We don't get close. We let technology do the work. He pulled out what looked like a small drone, but more sophisticated than any consumer model Glenn had seen. This little beauty can get us thermal imaging, audio recording, and chemical analysis from a safe distance. Completely legal as long as we stay in public airspace and don't interfere with his property rights. Meanwhile, Glenn had been working on a different angle. I've been thinking about Booth's psychology. He spent 18 months in prison because of our testimony. He's not just after revenge. He wants vindication. He wants to prove that we destroyed an innocent man's life. Wesley looked up from the financial documents he'd been analyzing. How does that help us? Because it means he can't just kill us quickly and quietly. He needs us to suffer publicly, and he needs the suffering to look like natural consequences of our own actions. Chad nodded slowly. So he's going to try to destroy your reputation first, then your family. Which means his next move will be something that makes us look guilty of something terrible, Glenn continued. Something that turns public opinion against us and makes our deaths look like justice. Glenn's phone buzzed with another message from Booth. You destroyed my life with lies. Tomorrow, everyone will see what kind of man you really are. That's not a death threat, Chad observed. That's a promise to expose something. Glenn felt a chill of recognition. He's going to frame us for something. Make it look like we're the real criminals. But frame you for what? Before Glenn could answer, Wesley's laptop chimed with an alert. Guys, we have movement at the warehouse. The surveillance feed showed Roland Booth's car pulling up to the warehouse, followed by a panel van Glenn didn't recognize. Several people emerged from the van, carrying equipment that looked disturbingly sophisticated. Can you get thermal imaging? Glenn asked. Chad operated the drone controls with practiced efficiency. Coming up now. Jesus, Glenn, look at this. The thermal image showed at least 8 people inside the warehouse, gathered around what appeared to be large-scale manufacturing equipment. The heat signatures suggested chemical processing, something that required precise temperature control. Chemical manufacturing, Chad said grimly. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about creating enough evidence to frame you for domestic terrorism. Glenn's mind raced through the possibilities. They're going to manufacture evidence that we were involved in producing illegal weapons. Maybe make it look like the plant was just a test run for something bigger. And when they discover this evidence, it destroys our credibility completely. Anything we say about being targeted looks like desperate lies from exposed terrorists. Wesley was frantically typing on his laptop. I'm cross-referencing the people in that van with known associates of Roland Booth. If we can identify them, maybe we can figure out exactly what they're planning. Chad studied the thermal imaging more carefully. Glenn, I don't think we have time for a detailed investigation. Whatever they're manufacturing in there, they're working fast. I guess we have maybe 12 hours before they deploy it. Then we need to move tonight. Move how? We can't just break into his warehouse. Glenn smiled, and Wesley recognized that dangerous expression from 3 days earlier. We don't break in. We let them come to us, and we make sure they bring all their evidence with them. I don't understand. Roland Booth wants to destroy my reputation by making me look like a terrorist. Fine. Let's give him an opportunity he can't resist. Glenn pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Rodriguez's number. Agent Rodriguez? Glenn Coleman. I need to report a suspicious chemical smell coming from my basement. I think someone might have planted something in my house. Chad and Wesley stared at him in shock. Glenn, what are you doing? Wesley whispered. Glenn held up a hand for silence as he continued the call. I'm worried it might be connected to the Roland Booth situation. Can you send a team to investigate tonight? I want everything documented in case this is part of his plan to frame my family. After Glenn hung up, Chad shook his head in admiration. "You magnificent bastard. You're going to let the FBI search your house and find nothing," which creates an official record that you're actively cooperating with law enforcement and concerned about being framed. Exactly. And when Booth moves against us tomorrow, every piece of evidence he plants will look exactly like what it is, a desperate attempt to frame an innocent family. Wesley was beginning to understand the strategy. But what if he doesn't take the bait? Glenn looked at the thermal imaging of the warehouse, where the manufacturing operation was still running at full capacity. Oh, he'll take it, because Roland Booth has been planning this revenge for 18 months, and he's not going to let the perfect opportunity slip away. He's going to try to plant that manufactured evidence tonight, while he thinks we're distracted by the FBI search. Chad was already checking his surveillance equipment, and when he does, we'll have everything documented from multiple angles. Plus, Glenn added, Agent Rodriguez will have a team standing by to respond immediately when we call in suspicious activity. Wesley looked between the two brothers. This is insane. What if something goes wrong? Glenn thought about the threat against his children, about the months of surveillance and psychological manipulation, about Roland Booth's systematic plan to destroy everything he'd built. Then Roland Booth will learn what happens when you threaten a combat engineer's family and give him time to prepare. The trap was set. In a few hours, they would learn whether Glenn's gamble would save his family or destroy everything he'd worked to protect. Chapter 6. The Perfect Trap. At 11 p.m., Agent Rodriguez arrived with a full forensics team to search Glenn's house. Glenn had made sure Melanie and the kids were staying at her sister's place, ostensibly for their safety during the investigation, but really to keep them away from what was about to unfold. "I appreciate you calling this in, Mr. Coleman," Rodriguez said as his team began systematically checking the basement. "Given everything that's happened with Booth, we need to take every precaution." Glenn nodded, playing his role perfectly. "I just want to make sure he can't plant evidence and claim we were manufacturing something dangerous. Better to have it officially documented that our house is clean." The search took 2 hours and turned up exactly nothing, which was precisely what Glenn had expected. Rodriguez had his team photograph and document every room, creating an official federal record that Glenn Coleman's house contained no illegal materials as of 1 a.m. on Thursday morning. After the FBI team left, Glenn, Chad, and Wesley gathered in the surveillance command center Chad had set up in Glenn's office. Multiple screens showed feeds from around the neighborhood, the warehouse, and key locations throughout the city. "Now we wait," Chad said, settling in with a cup of coffee. "If Booth is planning to plant evidence, he'll do it in the next few hours while he thinks the heat has died down." "What if he doesn't?" Wesley asked. "Then we go to phase 2, Glenn replied. "But I'm betting he can't resist the opportunity. His whole plan depends on making us look guilty, and he just got confirmation that we're clean as of tonight." At 3:17 a.m., the motion sensors around Glenn's neighborhood triggered. Chad pulled up the camera feeds and swore softly. "We've got movement. 2 vehicles approaching from different directions." Glenn watched as the vehicles stopped 3 blocks away from his house. 8 figures in dark clothing emerged, carrying equipment bags and what looked like portable manufacturing equipment. They're not just planting evidence, Glenn realized. They're going to manufacture it on-site to make it look fresher. Chad was already on his radio, coordinating with the backup surveillance positions he'd established earlier. "I've got eyes on the primary target. Booth is with them, directing the operation." Glenn called Agent Rodriguez. "Agent Rodriguez, I've got suspicious activity around my house. Multiple vehicles, people in dark clothing carrying equipment. I think Booth is making his move. We're en route. ETA 8 minutes. Do not engage, just observe and document." Glenn smiled grimly. "Don't worry, I have no intention of engaging. I want them caught in the act with all the evidence on them." The surveillance feeds showed Booth's team moving through Glenn's neighborhood with practiced efficiency. They had clearly studied the area extensively. They knew exactly where the streetlights were, which houses had dogs, and the optimal approach routes. "They're splitting up," Chad observed. "Looks like simultaneous entry points, front and back of the house." Glenn watched as several team members began setting up what appeared to be a portable chemical lab in his backyard, while others prepared to enter the house itself. "This is beautiful," Wesley said, somewhat awed by the complexity of what they were witnessing. They're not just framing you. They're creating a complete crime scene designed to support a domestic terrorism narrative. Which means when the FBI arrives, they're going to find Booth and his team in the middle of manufacturing evidence, Glenn replied. Red-handed, with all their equipment and plans. The surveillance footage would be damning, but Glenn wanted more than just a conviction. He wanted to understand the full scope of Booth's operation and make sure there were no other surprises waiting for his family. Chad, can you get audio from the backyard? Chad adjusted his equipment. Coming through now. Booth's voice came through clearly. The chemical residue needs to look like it's been here for weeks. Make sure the containers have partial fingerprints, but nothing too obvious. And remember, the detonation timer components go in the basement workshop area. Glenn felt his blood run cold. Detonation timer components? He's not just framing you for manufacturing chemical weapons, Chad said grimly. He's framing you for planning a bombing. Wesley pulled up news articles on his laptop. Glenn, there's a major political rally scheduled for this weekend at the convention center. 5,000 people expected, including the governor and 2 senators. Glenn understood immediately. He's going to make it look like we were planning to bomb the political rally, and he's going to discover the evidence just in time to stop the attack and look like a hero. Jesus, Chad muttered. This isn't just revenge anymore. He's trying to turn himself into some kind of folk hero who exposed a terrorist plot. Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled through Glenn's radio. We're in position. Count of suspects. Glenn, check the surveillance feeds. 8 total, including Booth. They're currently manufacturing evidence in my backyard and placing materials inside my house. Full documentation is being recorded. Understood. Moving in now. What happened next was chaos, but orchestrated chaos that Glenn had been planning for hours. FBI agents surrounded the house from all directions simultaneously, trapping Booth's team in the middle of their evidence-planting operation. The surveillance footage caught everything. Booth directing his team to place chemical residue in specific locations, the portable lab being used to manufacture fake explosive components, and most damaging of all, Booth himself explaining to his team exactly how the evidence should be arranged to support their narrative. This is for destroying my life, Booth snarled as Agent Rodriguez placed him in handcuffs. You ruined everything I built, and I was going to return the favor. Glenn emerged from his house as the arrests were being made, making sure the surveillance cameras caught his interaction with law enforcement. Agent Rodriguez, I can't thank you enough for taking this seriously. I was terrified that he might try to plant evidence. You did the right thing, Mr. Coleman. If you hadn't called us when you did, he might have successfully framed you for domestic terrorism. The beauty of Glenn's trap wasn't just that it caught Booth in the act. It was that it created an official federal record of Glenn's complete cooperation with law enforcement and his proactive efforts to prevent being framed. Every aspect of Booth's revenge plan was now documented as exactly what it was, an elaborate criminal conspiracy. Over the next few hours, as the FBI processed the crime scene and interrogated the suspects, the full scope of Booth's operation became clear. He had spent 6 months and nearly $500,000 creating an elaborate plan to destroy Glenn's family through a combination of slow poison, manufactured evidence, and staged terrorism charges. But like Walker before him, Booth had underestimated his target. He thought he was dealing with a lucky suburban engineer who had stumbled into one successful business victory. Instead, he'd gone to war with a combat veteran who had turned Booth's own elaborate plan into a perfect trap. Mr. Coleman, Agent Rodriguez said as the last of the suspects was loaded into FBI vehicles, I have to ask, how did you know exactly when and how they would try to plant evidence? Glenn looked at his house, where crime scene technicians were photographing all the fake evidence Booth's team had been caught placing. Roland Booth made the same mistake that criminals always make when they're dealing with engineers, Glenn replied. He assumed that because we think systematically, we can't think tactically. He planned his revenge like an engineering project, methodical, predictable, and vulnerable to someone who understood the system better than he did. Agent Rodriguez shook his head in admiration. Well, thanks to your planning, We've got enough evidence to put Booth and his entire operation away for the next 20 years. And we've prevented what could have been a devastating attack on that political rally." Glenn nodded, but his mind was already moving ahead to the next challenge. Booth might be neutralized, but his arrest would likely trigger investigations into everyone he'd been working with, everyone who had funded his operation, and everyone who might have similar grievances against the Coleman family. The war might be won, but Glenn had learned enough about his enemies to know that the peace would require constant vigilance. Chapter 7: Unraveling the Network. The interrogation of Roland Booth and his associates revealed a conspiracy far more extensive than Glenn had imagined. What had started as one man's revenge plot had evolved into a network of criminals, ex-convicts, and corrupt professionals who had been systematically targeting families they blamed for their legal troubles. Agent Rodriguez called Glenn the next morning with disturbing news. "We've been going through Booth's financial records and communications," Rodriguez said. "He wasn't just targeting your family. We've identified at least 12 other families across 5 states who were being stalked, harassed, or worse by this network." Glenn felt a chill run through him. How many others used the plant method? 3. All successful professionals who had provided testimony that resulted in criminal convictions. 2 of the families are already showing symptoms of poisoning, and 1. Rodriguez paused. One family in Phoenix didn't make it. Glenn closed his eyes, thinking about another family somewhere who had received a beautiful exotic plant as a gift and had no reason to suspect it was anything other than what it appeared to be. What about the people funding this operation? That's where things get really interesting. Booth was essentially running a revenge-for-hire service, funded by wealthy clients who wanted to destroy people without getting their own hands dirty. Wesley, who had been listening to the call on speaker, looked up from his laptop. A revenge service? Like a business. Complete with client consultation, customized attack plans, and ongoing surveillance services. Booth had turned his personal vendetta into a profitable criminal enterprise. Glenn felt his tactical mind engage. "Agent Rodriguez, has Booth been talking?" "Not willingly, but his computer files are very comprehensive. He documented everything: client contracts, target profiles, operational timelines. The man was meticulous." "What about his clients? Are they still active threats?" "That's why I'm calling. We've identified 3 clients who specifically requested services targeting your family. Booth was just the contractor. They're the ones who paid for the extended surveillance and the plant operation." Glenn exchanged glances with Wesley. "Who are they?" "Arnold Short, former CFO of Hartwell Construction. Carrie Mendoza, who lost a medical malpractice lawsuit where you testified as an expert witness 2 years ago. And," Rodriguez paused, "Stephen McIntyre, current board member of Riverside Private Academy." Glenn felt the world tilt around him. "McIntyre is on the board of my kid's school. Not just on the board. He's the chairman of the security committee. He's had access to detailed information about your children's schedules, pickup procedures, and emergency contact for over a year." Wesley was already pulling up information on his laptop. "Glenn, McIntyre was one of the investors who lost money in the medical device company we exposed last year. The one that was selling faulty surgical implants." Glenn remembered the case. His firm had been hired to analyze the mechanical failures in a series of surgical implants that had caused dozens of patients to require additional surgeries. Their testimony had not only resulted in criminal charges, but had also triggered a cascade of civil lawsuits that had bankrupted several companies. "How much access has McIntyre had to information about our family?" Rodriguez's voice was grim. "Complete access. School records, medical information for enrollment, emergency contact procedures, even architectural plans of the school buildings. If someone wanted to target your children specifically, McIntyre could have provided everything they needed." Glenn's protective instincts went into overdrive. "Where is he now?" "We're tracking him down, but his house appears to be empty and his office says he hasn't been in for 3 days." Glenn was already moving toward his gun safe. "Agent Rodriguez, I need protection details on my family immediately. If McIntyre has been planning something specific targeting the kids." "Already arranged." "But Glenn, there's something else. We found evidence that McIntyre has been in contact with other parents at Riverside Private Academy. Other families who've had business disputes or legal problems in the past. He's been recruiting. It looks like it. We think he was using his position on the school board to identify wealthy families with enemies, then connecting those families with booth services. Wesley looked up from his research. Glenn, this is massive. If McIntyre was essentially running a referral service for revenge operations, then there could be dozens of other families in danger right now. Glenn finished. Glenn's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your children look so peaceful when they sleep. Too bad you won't be around to protect them much longer. Agent Rodriguez heard Glenn's sharp intake of breath. What is it? Glenn read the message aloud. Rodriguez immediately got on his radio, coordinating with the protection details assigned to Glenn's family. All units, possible imminent threat to the Coleman family. Increase alert status immediately. But Glenn was already thinking beyond immediate protection. Agent Rodriguez, McIntyre has been planning this for over a year. He has detailed knowledge of our routines, our security measures, and our children's schedules. Traditional protection might not be enough. What are you suggesting? Glenn looked at Chad, who had been monitoring the conversation with the focused attention of a professional soldier. I'm suggesting that Stephen McIntyre is about to learn the same lesson that Roland Booth just learned. You don't threaten a combat engineer's family and expect to walk away. Chad was already checking his equipment. What's the plan? Glenn pulled up the architectural plans of Riverside Private Academy on his computer. McIntyre knows the school's security procedures because he helped design them. But he doesn't know that we know he's involved. You want to use the school as bait? I want to use ourselves as bait. McIntyre wants to hurt our children to get to us. Instead, we're going to make ourselves available and let him come after us directly. Wesley looked concerned. That's incredibly dangerous. Glenn nodded. It is, but it's also the only way to end this permanently. As long as McIntyre is out there with his network of clients and contacts, our family will never be safe. Agent Rodriguez came back on the line. We've got movement. McIntyre's car was spotted heading toward the school district. He's not alone. At least 3 other vehicles in convoy. Glenn felt that familiar combat calm descend over him. Agent Rodriguez, I need you to coordinate with Chad on positioning your tactical teams. We're going to end this tonight. Glenn, I can't authorize you to engage in active combat operations. You don't have to. Everything we're going to do will be in defense of our family and in full cooperation with federal law enforcement. But when this is over, Stephen McIntyre and his network are going to wish they'd chosen different targets. Chad was already suiting up in tactical gear. It's time to show these people what happens when you threaten the wrong family. Glenn looked at the surveillance feeds showing McIntyre's convoy approaching their neighborhood. After months of being hunted, it was time to become the hunter. The final battle for the Coleman family's safety was about to begin. Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. Glenn's plan was elegantly simple. Instead of hiding from McIntyre, he would make himself an irresistible target while leading the attack into a carefully prepared killing ground. But first, he needed to ensure his family's absolute safety. Chad, I need you to get Melanie and the kids to your ranch in Wyoming. Tonight. What about you? I'm staying here to finish this. McIntyre won't stop until he gets personal revenge against me specifically. If I'm not here, he might go after the kids wherever they are. Wesley looked up from the tactical communications setup he'd been monitoring. The FBI intercepts are showing increased chatter between McIntyre and at least 6 other individuals. Glenn, this isn't just one man with a grudge anymore. This is a coordinated assault. Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. Glenn, we've confirmed that McIntyre has been in contact with several former military contractors, the kind of people who know how to conduct urban warfare operations. Glenn nodded grimly. Then we make sure this urban warfare happens exactly where and when we want it to. Chad finished loading his vehicle with Melanie and the kids' belongings. I can have them in Wyoming in 12 hours. But Glenn, I don't like leaving you here alone. I won't be alone. Wesley's staying, and Agent Rodriguez has a full tactical team in position. Glenn knelt down to hug Emma and Ethan goodbye, trying to project calm confidence while his heart was breaking at the thought of the danger they'd been in. "Daddy, why do we have to go to Uncle Chad's ranch?" Emma asked. "Because there are some bad people who want to hurt our family, and Uncle Chad's ranch is the safest place for you and Mom to be while I take care of the problem." Ethan, who had always been the more perceptive of the twins, looked at his father with 8-year-old seriousness. "Are you going to stop the bad people, Dad?" "Yes, son, I am. And when I do, they'll never be able to hurt any family ever again." After Chad left with Glenn's family, the house felt strangely empty. But it also felt like what it was about to become, a fortress designed to protect what Glenn valued most. Wesley had been monitoring electronic communications all day. "Glenn, McIntyre's people are conducting surveillance on the house right now. They know Melanie and the kids left with Chad." "Good. That means they'll assume I'm alone and vulnerable." Agent Rodriguez arrived at 10 p.m. with a tactical briefing. "We've identified 7 individuals working with McIntyre, including 2 former special operations soldiers and a demolitions expert. They're not just planning to hurt you, Glenn. They're planning to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong." "What's their timeline?" "Based on our intercepts, they're moving tonight, probably between 2 and 4 a.m. when they think you'll be asleep." Glenn looked at the defensive preparations he and Chad had made earlier. "Perfect. That gives us time to make sure everything is ready." The house had been transformed into a tactical nightmare for anyone attempting to breach it. Every entry point had been rigged with motion sensors, cameras, and defensive measures that would channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. More importantly, every aspect of the defense had been designed to be legally justifiable as protection of Glenn's home and family. "The beauty of this setup," Glenn explained to Agent Rodriguez, "is that we're not ambushing them. They're breaking into my house with intent to commit murder. Everything we do after that is legal self-defense." At 1:47 a.m., the perimeter sensors triggered. 7 figures in tactical gear were approaching the house from multiple directions, using military-style coordination and communication. Glenn watched from his reinforced command center as McIntyre's team moved into position. They were good, professional, disciplined, and well-equipped. Under normal circumstances, they probably would have succeeded in their mission. But these weren't normal circumstances. They were attacking the home of a combat engineer who had had weeks to prepare and had unlimited federal law enforcement backup. "Agent Rodriguez, they're moving into position. Are your teams ready?" "Standing by." "Glenn, once this starts, you follow our lead. These people are professional killers." Glenn checked his weapon and body armor one final time. "Agent Rodriguez, these people made one critical mistake." "What's that?" "They assumed I was a victim. They're about to learn I'm not." The attack began at 2:23 a.m. with a coordinated breach of 3 entry points simultaneously. McIntyre's team moved through the house with professional efficiency, using suppressed weapons and military tactics. What they found was exactly what Glenn had wanted them to find: a house that appeared to be defended by one man with limited tactical experience. Glenn led them through the house room by room, appearing to retreat in panic while actually drawing them deeper into the trap he'd prepared. Every movement had been choreographed to make McIntyre's team think they were winning while actually positioning them exactly where the FBI's tactical units could engage them most effectively. The final confrontation took place in Glenn's living room, where McIntyre himself cornered what he thought was a terrified suburban engineer. "You destroyed my life," McIntyre snarled, aiming his weapon at Glenn's chest. "You cost me everything I'd built, everything I worked for. Now I'm going to return the favor." Glenn looked at McIntyre with cold satisfaction. "Stephen, you made the same mistake everyone else has made." "What mistake?" "You assumed I was a victim instead of a predator." The FBI tactical team breached the room from 3 directions simultaneously, ending the threat in less than 10 seconds. McIntyre and his remaining team members were taken alive, but barely. When the smoke cleared, Agent Rodriguez found Glenn calmly documenting the scene with his phone, making sure every aspect of the defensive action was properly recorded. "It's over?" Rodriguez asked. Glenn looked at the captured attackers, then at the evidence that would ensure they spent the rest of their lives in federal prison. "The shooting's over." But McIntyre's client network is still out there, and they're going to be very unhappy when they learn their revenge service has been shut down. Wesley emerged from the command center where he'd been coordinating communications. Actually, Glenn, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Why not? Wesley showed him a laptop displaying financial records. While you were dealing with the attack, I've been tracing the money trail from all of Booth's clients. The FBI raids tonight didn't just capture McIntyre's team. They captured records that implicate over 40 people in 12 states who were paying for revenge services. Agent Rodriguez looked at the scope of the evidence. This is going to be the largest organized crime takedown in federal history. Glenn felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with personal victory. How many families were they targeting? At least 100, maybe more. Glenn, your decision to fight instead of hide just saved the lives of people you'll never meet. Glenn thought about the family in Phoenix who hadn't been as lucky as his own, about the dozens of families who were going to sleep safely tonight because they would never know how close they'd come to being victims of this network. Agent Rodriguez, I want to make sure every family that was being targeted gets notified and protected until all these arrests are completed. Already in progress. The FBI is coordinating with local law enforcement across 12 states. Glenn's phone buzzed with a message from Chad. All secure in Wyoming. Kids asking when Dad's coming to visit the ranch. Glenn smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that had been there for weeks. Tell them Dad will be there soon. The bad people have been stopped. As the FBI crime scene teams processed the evidence and the last of the attackers were loaded into federal transport vehicles, Glenn stood in his living room surveying the damage. His house looked like a war zone, but his family was safe, and a network of killers had been dismantled. Wesley joined him, carrying a bottle of whiskey that had somehow survived the evening's chaos. So, Wesley said, pouring 2 glasses, when you said you were going to show them what a real engineer could do, I don't think they expected anything quite this comprehensive. Glenn accepted the whiskey and raised his glass. To the families we'll never meet who get to wake up safe tomorrow. They drank in silence. 2 engineers who had used their skills to protect what mattered most. The war for Glenn Coleman's family was finally over. Chapter 9. Justice and New Beginnings. 3 months later, Glenn stood in a federal courthouse in Denver watching as Stephen McIntyre received a life sentence without possibility of parole. The courtroom was packed with family members of other victims, people who had been targeted by the Revenge Network but had lived to see justice served. Agent Rodriguez sat in the gallery behind Glenn, having become something of a friend during the extensive investigation and trial preparation. The scope of the conspiracy they'd uncovered had made national news and led to congressional hearings about domestic terrorism networks. The defendant, Judge Patricia Morrison, said, orchestrated a criminal enterprise that resulted in multiple murders, attempted murders, and the systematic terrorization of over 100 American families. The court finds that the defendant poses a continuing danger to society and that no sentence short of life imprisonment would be adequate to protect the public. Glenn felt a deep satisfaction as McIntyre was led away in shackles. But the real victory wasn't the punishment of his enemies. It was the knowledge that Emma and Ethan would grow up in a world where this particular network of killers could never threaten anyone again. After the sentencing, Glenn met with some of the other families who had been targeted. The Hendersons from Phoenix, whose teenage daughter had nearly died from a poison plant. The Williams family from Texas, who had been stalked for months by hired investigators. The Johnsons from Florida, whose business had been sabotaged by arsonists working for the network. Mr. Coleman, Mrs. Henderson said, I want to thank you for what you did. If you hadn't fought back when you did, my daughter would be dead. Glenn shook her hand, seeing his own protective fury reflected in her eyes. Mrs. Henderson, the only reason any of us survive this is because we refuse to be victims. Your family's courage in testifying helped put these people away for life. Dr. Williams, a pediatric surgeon who had been targeted after testifying about faulty medical devices, joined the conversation. What are you going to do now? I imagine it's hard to go back to normal life after something like this. Glenn had been thinking about that question for weeks. Actually, Wesley and I have decided to make some changes to our engineering firm. What kind of changes? We're starting a new division, security consulting for families who are being threatened or stalked. Too many people don't know how to protect themselves when they become targets, and law enforcement can't always provide adequate protection. Agent Rodriguez, who had been listening to the conversation, nodded approvingly. There's definitely a need for that kind of service. Most people don't have your background or resources. Glenn thought about the months of fear his family had endured, about the sophisticated planning it had taken to turn the tables on their attackers. We're calling it Coleman Burton Personal Security. The idea is to help families identify threats early, implement effective countermeasures, and work with law enforcement to resolve dangerous situations. Wesley, who had been talking with the FBI's cybercrime specialists, joined the group. We're also working with federal agencies to develop better systems for detecting organized stalking and revenge networks before they can hurt anyone. Dr. Williams looked intrigued. That sounds like exactly what a lot of families need. Are you taking clients? Glenn smiled. We officially launch next month. Our first case is already interesting. A judge in California who's been receiving death threats from a network of defendants she's sentenced over the years. The conversation was interrupted by Glenn's phone buzzing with a call from Chad in Wyoming. Glenn, you need to get out of here. Emma just caught a fish bigger than she is, and Ethan has decided he wants to be a cowboy when he grows up. Melanie says she's never moving back to the city. Glenn laughed, the sound carrying none of the tension that had characterized his voice for months. Tell them I'll be there tomorrow. The trial's over, and the business can wait a few more days. How did it end? Life without parole from McIntyre. Life sentences for 3 of his associates. The others got between 20 and 30 years. Nobody from this network will ever threaten a family again. Good. Emma and Ethan have been asking when they can go home. Glenn looked around the courthouse at the families who were finally able to move on with their lives, at the law enforcement officers who had worked tirelessly to bring justice. Tell them they can come home anytime they want. The bad people are gone, and they're never coming back. That evening, Glenn and Wesley sat in a Denver bar popular with law enforcement, sharing drinks with Agent Rodriguez and several other FBI agents who had worked on the case. You know, Rodriguez said, in 15 years with the Bureau, I've never seen a civilian operation as effective as what you pulled off. You took down a network that we didn't even know existed. Glenn raised his beer. We got lucky. If Melanie hadn't bought that plant, if Wesley hadn't recognized what it was, if you hadn't taken the threat seriously. That wasn't luck, Rodriguez interrupted. That was intelligence, preparation, and the kind of determination that most people don't have when their families are threatened. You turned a systematic attempt to destroy your family into the downfall of everyone who tried to hurt you. Wesley nodded. Plus, Glenn never forgot that this wasn't just about us. Every move he made was designed to protect other families, too. Glenn thought about the families in Phoenix, Texas, and Florida who would sleep safely that night because a network of killers was behind bars. He thought about Emma and Ethan growing up without the shadow of threat hanging over their lives. Agent Rodriguez, I want to ask you something. In your professional opinion, do you think we've seen the end of organized revenge networks like this one? Rodriguez considered the question seriously. Unfortunately, no. There will always be people who want to hurt others and people willing to help them do it for money. But what you've done, exposing how these networks operate and showing that they can be defeated, that's going to make it a lot harder for them to succeed. Glenn nodded. Then Coleman Burton Personal Security has a lot of work to do. 2 days later, Glenn stood on the porch of Chad's ranch in Wyoming, watching Emma and Ethan ride horses in the corral while Melanie helped Chad's wife prepare dinner. The scene was so perfectly normal, so beautifully peaceful, that it was hard to believe they'd been living in mortal danger just a few months earlier. Dad, Emma called from her horse. Uncle Chad says we can come visit the ranch anytime we want. That's right, sweetheart. And you can visit anytime you want. Ethan rode over to the fence where Glenn was standing. Dad, are the bad people really gone forever? Glenn looked at his son, 8 years old, and already showing the kind of thoughtful seriousness that would serve him well in life. Yes, son. The specific bad people who wanted to hurt our family are gone forever. They're in prison and they're never getting out. but there might be other bad people someday. Glenn considered how to answer that honestly without frightening his child. There might be, Ethan, but now we know how to protect ourselves, and we have friends who will help us if we ever need it. Ethan nodded solemnly, then brightened. And you know how to catch the bad people in traps. Glenn laughed. That's right. I know how to catch bad people in traps. That evening, after the kids were asleep, Glenn and Melanie walked through the ranch's pastures under a sky full of stars that were invisible from their Denver neighborhood. Glenn, Melanie said quietly, I've been thinking about what we've been through, and I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm proud of you. Not just for protecting us, but for how you protected us. You could have just run, or hidden, or let the FBI handle everything. Instead, you turned the whole thing around and saved 100 other families in the process. Glenn stopped walking and pulled his wife close. Melanie, I want you to know something. From the moment I realized our family was in danger, I never doubted that we would survive this. Not because I'm particularly brave or smart, but because I wasn't willing to accept any other outcome. What do you mean? I mean that some things in life are non-negotiable. The safety of my family is one of those things. And anyone who threatens what I'm not willing to lose is going to discover just how dangerous that makes me. Melanie kissed him, and for the first time in months, Glenn felt complete peace. The Coleman family had not just survived their ordeal. They had emerged stronger, closer, and surrounded by